question.
Please, to ask me anything.
Do you know Chandora Paddy, the painter who lives across the hall?
I know him by sight. We nod to each other on the stairs. Nothing more.
I see. Have you been in your room most of the evening, may I ask?
Yes. I have been sitting here quietly for the past few hours, reading over the Analects of Confucius.
May I ask, sir, whether you've heard any unusual noises this evening? Sounds of a struggle or a cry from the direction of Sandor Pardi's room, for instance?
I do not think so. Wait, yes. I think I did hear laced voices in there and the sound of a cry.
About how long ago was this?
Oh, an hour ago, perhaps more. Is anything wrong? Has trouble come to Shandor?
Shandor? I thought you said you had only a nodding acquaintance with the gentleman.
Well, he is a well-known artist. It is only natural I should call him by his false name, Mr. Holmes, even though I do not know him. Has something happened to him?
I'm afraid so, but I can't tell you any more about it at the moment. Thank you for your cooperation. We shall see you again, no doubt. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. That fellow wasn't telling us the truth, you know, Holmes. He seemed very shifty to me. Oh, where are we going now?
Downstairs to the porter's desk. There's only one entrance to this house, you'll remember. The porter may be able to tell us of any unusual comings and goings in the last hour or two. Come on, old chap, don't dawdle. There's a great deal of work ahead of us.
Yeah, Herr Holmes, what can I do for you?
How long have you been on duty tonight?
Since 5 o'clock.
Did you notice what people have come in or gone out since then?
No one has gone out.
Ah, splendid. And who came in?
Fräulein Ullenstein came in just after 6,
Oh, yes.
and Herr Apperdy, the painter, came in a few minutes later. That is all.
Ah. Who lives in the other ground floor apartments besides Dr. Watson and myself?
There are only 2 other apartments. In the one to the right of the corridor lives Madame Janssen. She's a Swedish lady, a sculptor.
And in the other?
Signora Violetti, the Italian opera singer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm much obliged to you.
I'm happy to be of service, Herr Holmes.
Where are we off to now? Back to our room?
Oh, we'll call on Madame Violetti if she's at home.
It sounds as if she's very much at home.
Sherlock Holmes, that is a friend have come to see me. Bravo, bravissimo. I have so much wish to make your acquaintance. Sit down.
No, I'm afraid we can only stay for a moment, madam. My friend wanted to ask you a few questions.
Yes, Signora. I just want to know...
I know your question.
Oh.
You play the violin. I have heard you.
Yes.
You want to know whether the great Valeria will allow you to accompany her in a magnificent soprano aria allo so from Mozart's Il Flauto Magico. Violetti's answer to your question is si.
Yes, madam. Forgive me, Signora, but if you don't mind. But that was not one of my questions.
It was not. But I will sing it with you just the same.
You flatter me, but at the moment there are other things on my mind. Signora Violetti, do you know Chandora Paddy?
By his side. That is all. He make eyes at me, but I no pay attention. I do not like on Gary.
You haven't seen him this evening?
No. I've been alone, reviewing the score at La Traviata. I am to sing it next week here in Vienna. I hope you will both be present. It would be a great treat for you.
I'm sure it would be, Signora. Now, if you'll excuse us.
Oh, it is sad you must go so soon. But come and see me again, and I will sing for you both before you leave Vienna.
Great Scott, the ghastly woman. She's not your murderess, I'm sure. And now I suppose we'll have to question this sculptress woman. And then we'll talk to everyone in the house.
No, I think before we visit her, we'll examine the dead man's room a little more closely. That black tin dispatch box may hold the key to this mystery.
Idiot.
Numbskull. I wrote the papers thoroughly at first.
Tell an interesting story. Pardi had obviously been blackmailing Madame Janssen, the sculptress.
Yes, and also our friend, the Chinese actor, Lai Tung-fo.
Then Lai Tung-fo was lying when he said that he didn't know our family.
Obviously.
By George, 3 of the 4 people living in this house in his power.
Hello.
What's the matter? What have you found?
Cigar ash on the carpet. Prints of a small foot leading us to this closet.
Somebody must be hiding in there.
Huh? Possibly. Uh-huh. Take a look at these, Watson.
And hair. Long black hair. Where were they?
On a hook in the cupboard. Someone bracing themselves back so as to be out of sight could easily leave such evidence.
I've got it, Holmes. I've got it. The long black hair, the long nails that caused the peculiar mark on a part of his throat, and a small footprint. It was a woman.
Possibly, but which one? Fräulein Pullenstein and Signora Violette both have blonde hair, remember?
And it must be that sculptress woman.
Not necessarily. Who else, not a woman, might have small feet, long nails, and long black hair?
By Jove, the Chinese actress.
Come on.
I hope he's still there.
Come on, let's go in.
Holmes, look at him. He's praying. His head's in his hand.
Oh, my dear fellow, I'm afraid prayers can do him no good now. He's been strangled. Strangled with his own cue.
Dr. Watson's story will continue in just a second. So I'm going to take that second for a fast question. I know you've probably tasted port wine, but have you ever tasted Petri California port? Have you? Because if you haven't tried Petri port, well, you can just tell yourself right now you don't know how good a port can be. Petri port is rich, red, and hearty. But what you want to know is, how does it taste? The answer to that is short and sweet. The taste is terrific. And say, Petri California Muscatel is on the terrific side, too. Petri Muscatel has the flavor and fragrance of real, juicy Muscat grapes. Both wines are perfect after dinner or any time you're sitting around talking with your friends. Try them. They're great. They've got to be, because they're Petri. And now, back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. The famous pair are staying in Vienna, where they've become involved in the mysterious strangling of a notorious blackmailer. As we rejoin our story, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are cross-questioning another of the suspects, a Swedish sculptress by the name of Madame Janssen.
What do you want with me? Why have you come in here?
We just wanted to ask you a few questions, madam.
To admire your figurines, may I ask if you always work in clay?
Yeah. But what's that to you? Do you wish to buy some of my sculpture?
No, but I assure you the question was pertinent.
Tell me who you are and stop wasting my time.
My friend is a private detective, madam.
A detective? Who sent you here?
No one sent me here. I'm conducting an investigation of the murder of Shandor Paddy.
Shandor dead. Good. I'm glad.
Yes, madam, but we happen to know that you had a motive for killing him. He'd been blackmailing you.
Get out of here. What right have you to come here and question me?
No. Look here, madam. If you know what's good for you, you will answer our
And
question.
if you know what's good for you, you'll get out of here, both of you.
Come along, Watson.
But, Holmes, you can't possibly...
Forgive me, madam, for our intrusion. We've meant no rudeness.
You have been rude. Intolerably rude. Go away.
Whatever made you back down like that, Holmes? Obviously, she's the killer.
Rubbish.
But her hair was jet black.
Yes, but it was short hair. And didn't you notice the size of her feet? Anyway, she works in clay. If it had been marble, I might have suspected her.
Upon my soul, Holmes, I wish you'd tell me what you're driving at.
I've the answer to these killings now, Watson. But I'll have to prove it. I'm afraid I must work without you, old chap. Do you mind waiting for me in our room? No. Wait a minute. That may be dangerous. Wait for me in Signora Violette's room, if you don't mind. I'll join you there as soon as my work is done. Pretend that you have returned because you were so enchanted with her voice.
Oh, good Scott, Holmes, you can't ask me to be alone with that dreadful woman.
Please do as I say, Watson, and don't question me. There isn't a moment to be lost.
you know that aria, my dear doctor?
No, madam, I'm afraid I don't.
You've not heard about great Giuseppe Verdi?
Oh, yes, I heard of him, of course, but I can't identify his work.
That was from a Rigoletto, you silly man.
Rigoletto?
Come,
Oh.
tell me your favorite composer. I will sing something of his just for you. I will turn the gaslight down.
No, do that. Turn the gaslight down.
That will be so much more romantic.
Oh, gracious me.
Now, who is your favorite composer?
Oh, I don't know if I have any favorite. What's his name? Wagner's very fine, you know.
Oh, Wagner is a heavy like most German composers. But the Violatti can master him.
Oh, Lord, here she goes again.
Come in. I cannot see who it is. Come into the light.
Great heavens, a Chinese actor.
I am sorry to make commotion, but as we say in my country, those who return from graves speak with double knowledge.
Oh, you devil! You devil! I kill you once! I kill you once! I kill you again!
Thank you for the confession, Senora Violetti. You can testify to it, Watson.
Holmes.
No, you don't, Senora. Your nails are too sharp for my liking.
I'll kill you two, both of you! I'll kill you!
Watson, catch her.
She's fainted, Holmes.
Painted, eh? What an undramatic exit for a most dramatic lady.
Well, Holmes, now that you've turned Signora Violetti over to the police, perhaps you tell me what made you certain that she was the murderess.
It was obvious from the beginning that Apari was strangled by someone with long fingernails. When Lai Tung Fo was killed, it ruled him out. Then who was the woman with a motive and long nails?
Best of all, no.
Elementary, my dear fellow. Was the woman Fräulein Ullenstein? No. Being a concert pianist, her nails were naturally short. The sculptress who worked in clay? Again, no. That would make it impossible for her to mold her delicate figurines. Therefore, Signora Violetti, by the process of elimination, was the only woman with long nails.
But why did she strangle the Chinese actor, too?
Undoubtedly, he witnessed the first killing. The long black hairs in the closet were from his cue. I presume that later he threatened Signora Violetti, and so he himself was strangled.
I still don't understand why she strangled our party in the first place.
Don't you, Watson? Well, I think you'll find that he's been blackmailing her, too. Remember, he had documents incriminating everyone in the house except her. I think we may assume she killed him and then removed her own papers from the dispatch box. But I'd no proof, and so, well, I had to frighten her into confession.
So that's why you disguised yourself as Lai Tung Fu.
Yes, I borrowed the robes from his room. It was lucky that the lights were low as I entered. Yes. And it's also fortunate that to the average European, all Chinese look alike. Come in. Ah, Fräulein Ullenstein. We'll be coming in to see you in a few minutes.
I've been waiting so anxiously. Is everything all right?
Well, from your point of view, my dear young lady, yes.
There's nothing more for you to worry about.
Oh, I would like to repay you, Herr Holmes.
I've done very little for you, but if you really feel that you owe me something...
Yeah?
Well, perhaps just this once you wouldn't mind accompanying an amateur?
It would be a pleasure. What is it you wish me to play?
A Mozart sonata.
But of course. The rondo from the E-flat, I
Ah,
suppose.
that's splendid. Please, Fräulein.
You like Mozart, Herr Doctor?
Oh, very much, young lady, very much. In fact, I might say he is my favorite composer. Charming. Perfectly charming. I only wish that all our adventures could end so melodiously.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, A Case of Identity. Mr. Rathbone appears with the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce with the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petrie family. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petrie Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petrie family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. Say, and I've got a little something to tell you myself. I want to tell you that if you haven't sent in for your free recipe calendar, I think we've still got enough on hand to take care of you if you hurry. The requests have been pouring in like mad, literally by the thousands. No wonder. It's really a terrific offer. It's a calendar for 1945 and 46. It's in full color, and it tells you all you have to know about cooking with Petrie wine. Write to Petrie Wine, P-E-T-R-I, Petrie Wine, San Francisco 26, California. San Francisco 26, California. But better hurry so we can get your recipe calendar to you immediately. And now let's drop in on our good friend, Dr. Watson. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Foreman.
Where are the puppies tonight?
Well, I found them playing with a dead seagull, so they've been sent up to bed in disgrace.
Well, you certainly look comfortable yourself, Doctor. What's that small blue book you're reading? The latest bestseller?
No, indeed not. This book was never a bestseller, my boy. It's entitled Practical Handbook of Bee Culture, with some observations on the segregation of the queen.
Quite a catchy title. Who's the author?
A fellow by the name of Sherlock Holmes. He was engaged in writing it when the adventure I'm going to tell you about took place.
Well, you told us last week, Doctor, that a pair of canaries played an important part in the story.
That's quite right, Mr. Foreman. It was in the summer of 1908, I remember, and I'd persuaded Holmes to leave his Sussex bee farm for a few weeks and to join me in a holiday at the little fishing village of Kingsgate in Kent. We were staying at a charming little inn called the Fisherman's Arm, and for the first few days, our holiday was delightful. And then,
I suppose, Doctor, strange things began to happen.
They did indeed, Mr. Foreman, they did indeed. Very strange things. One afternoon, we'd just finished a late tea, I remember, and were sitting outside on the lawn sunning ourselves and enjoying our pipes. Holmes lay back with his long, thin fingers clasped behind his head, gazing thoughtfully at the multicolored fishing boat bobbing at anchor in the harbor. After a moment or two, he spoke to me.
Watson, you're really a splendid companion. I can't think of anyone else who would let me smoke my pipe in silence for half an hour without asking me what I'm thinking about.
That's not very surprising, Holmes, after all the years that we've been together.
Well, nevertheless, the gift is a rare one, old chap, and I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Willow. By the way, since the half hour's up, what have you been thinking about?
The lack of enterprise of a modern criminal. Audacity and romance seem to have passed forever from the criminal world. Read this note I received this morning, old fellow. See for yourself how low I have sunk.
All right, have a look. Mr. Holmes, I am staying in the same inn as yourself, and as I have had a very frightening experience, this is me, I thought perhaps you would help me. Please do. It's signed Mary Victor.
An exciting document, isn't it? Written on lavender notepaper, reeking of perfume, and the handwriting is obviously that of an adolescent girl.
You haven't bothered to answer, of course.
Oh, yes, I have. I sent a message back by our good landlord that I would be glad to see her.
Why, Holmes? You came down here to complete your handbook on bee farming.
Oh. Confound it. Those two wretched canaries are getting their sunbath on the windowsill above us.
Oh, I think it's rather jolly to hear the little fellows chirping away up there.
Oh, I find the sound most distracting. Let's go inside.
You know, Holmes, those birds are owned by a charming couple, a Mr. and Mrs. Wainwright. I was chatting with them on the stairs this morning.
I'm afraid their charm will escape me as long as their pets continue to tweet in that irritating manner. You've spoken of the peace and quiet of the country inn, Watson, and yet I find that... Come in. Ah, Miss Mary Victor, I presume.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Please come in and close the door, won't you? Thank you. This is my old friend, Dr. Watson. You may speak quite freely in front of him.
How do you do, Miss Victor?
How do you do, Doctor?
Now, sit down, young lady, and tell me what's troubling you.
Mr. Holmes, I came down here from London to get away from someone, but I've been followed. I've been afraid to leave the inn. Until last night, I felt I couldn't stand being cooped up any longer. So I went for a walk on the seashore. Someone followed me, Mr. Holmes. I ran back here as fast as I could, but now he knows where I live, and I'm frightened. Please help me.
My dear Miss Victor, I'm afraid you must be much more specific before I can help you. Who has followed you down here, and why are you afraid of him?
I'll tell you the whole story. It'll sound strange to you, but I swear it's... Oh, there he is again, down by the gate. I'm going to my room.
Now. Don't you be frightened, Miss Victor. I'm sure we'll be... That's all. What sort of thing?
I don't see anyone outside who might have frightened her. There are 2 or 3 fishermen loitering about. Wait a minute. Here's a young fellow walking up the path. Come on, Watson. Out through the French windows again.
Oh, good gracious me. Here we go again.
I think we'll take the liberty of accosting him. Excuse me, sir.
Yes?
Are you looking for Miss Mary Victor?
Is she young and pretty?
Yes, sir. She is. Extremely so.
Then I'm looking for her. Where can I find her?
I can see you're being facetious, sir.
Well, there's no harm in that, is there? By the way, who are you gentlemen, may I ask?
My name is Holmes, and this is my friend, Dr. Watson.
I'm Basil Carter. You're not Sherlock Holmes, are you?
That is my name.
I thought you seemed familiar. I know your brother, Mycroft.
Oh, indeed. Then I presume you're connected with the Foreign Office.
Yes, I'm in the consular service.
Are you staying at the inn, young man?
For a few days. It's funny that I should run into the great Sherlock Holmes.
Why, may I ask?
I was planning a murder.
Oh, really?
But with you
Murder?
gentlemen here, I see that I shall have to be very discreet.
Who is your intended victim, may I inquire?
There are 2 of them. The 2 canaries in the room next to mine.
For a moment, I thought that you were really serious.
But I am serious. The wretched creatures have been driving me mad.
Yes, I quite sympathize with you, sir. I've been thinking of committing a slight case of mayhem on them myself.
We can take one apiece, Mr. Holmes. Well, I'm glad to have met you both. I'll probably see you again.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, sir. Goodbye. I don't like that fellow, Holmes. If you ask me, he's the man who's been frightening the poor girl that came to us. He had a peculiar look on his face when you asked me if he was looking for Mary Victor.
Well, there's only one person who can settle the question, and that's the young lady herself. Come on, old fellow. Let's go back indoors.
Shh. Here comes Wainwright, the owner of the Canaries. Good evening, Mr. Wainwright.
Good evening, gentlemen.
This is my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
I'm honored to meet you, sir.
How do you do, Mr. Wainwright?
Beautiful evening, isn't it? I just took a stroll down to the store to get some more birdseed. By the way, Mr. Holmes, I hope our canaries don't bother you. Little fellows are such a comfort to my wife and me.
Oh, no, not at all, sir. I find their chirruping very soothing.
Oh, I'm so glad. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, sir.
Good night, Mr. Wilson.
Not Wilson, Mr. Holmes. Wainwright.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. I thought you said Wilson.
Good night.
Well, not like you to mix up names, Holmes.
I didn't mix them up, old fellow. I never forget a face. Mr. Wainwright is in reality Wilson, the notorious canary trainer, whom I had the pleasure of sending to prison for a 7-year stretch in '95. Some years later, he made one of the most spectacular escapes from prison in the history of crime, and has since managed to evade all efforts to recapture him.
Great Scott, he seems a sweet old fellow.
Well, possibly he's reformed, but I doubt it. Our stage is set for an intriguing problem, old chap, and our cast is an interesting one. A frightened young girl, a diplomat of uncertain integrity, and a noted criminal. Watson, I have a feeling that once again the game's afoot.
Holmes, why are we strolling along the pier instead of staying at the inn? I thought you said that you were expecting trouble.
I am, old chap, and I'm sure it'll find us out.
You know, Holmes, I'm still completely mystified by the behavior of that girl, Mary Victor. I knocked at her door last evening, again this morning. I couldn't get any answer.
And the landlord told me that she was not seen at dinner last night, nor at breakfast this morning, and yet her room has not been vacated. Curious.
Hello, there's the village constable sunning himself at the end of the pier.
Good morning, Sergeant Blake.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. How are you, gentlemen?
Yes, splendid, thank you, Sergeant, and very appreciative of the weather that you've provided for us.
Oh, think nothing of it, sir. We always arrange that for our really distinguished visitors. By the way, Mr. Holmes, I was reading one of your friend's stories about you last night. The one called The Adventure of Mysteria Lodge.
That was, Wisteria Lodge, you foolish fellow.
Well, maybe it was. Anyway, I was reading it aloud to me old woman. And if you don't mind my saying so, Mr. Holmes, we both thought you made a bad mistake.
Oh, really?
Though, of course, you come out all right in the end.
Dear me, Sergeant, I stand reproved.
Excuse me, Sergeant. Holmes, look. Look at that figure standing by itself right at the end of the pier.
Mm-hmm. Our friend Wilson, the canary trainer.
He's got a revolver.
Here, we don't want any of these goings-on in Kingsgate.
Come on.
Here, you. What are you doing waving that revolver about?
Keep back, the three of you.
I'm the law here. Don't you tell me what to do.
Keep back, I say. I'm not afraid to fire.
Better do as he says, Sergeant. He's no one to trifle with. Just exactly what are you up to, Wilson?
You've caught up with me once again, Sherlock Holmes. But this time you're not going to send me back to a prison again. And maybe the gallows. If I can't escape you, then I'll take my own way out with this revolver.
Wilson, what in thunder are you talking about?
The murder at the inn last night. I did it.
Murder?
Confessing in front of the three of you. Or you leave my wife alone. She didn't know anything about it. Now, I hope you're satisfied, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
He's pointing the revolver as he heads.
Wilson, you fool, stop it!
Strike me pink. He done it. Over the pier and into the sea.
Get help, Sergeant. It's possible he isn't dead.
Right, sir.
Come on, Watson.
We're going back to the inn, I suppose.
Of course we are. We've just heard a murder confession, but we don't know who has been murdered.
Holmes, what was the telegram that you sent off just now?
A message to my brother, Mycroft. The innkeeper informed me that Basil Carter, the young diplomat we met yesterday, left the inn rather hurriedly in the early hours of this morning. Come on, let's go upstairs.
Well, we'll have to break the news to Mrs. Wainwright, I suppose.
Before we do that, I think we'll see if Miss Victor's in her room. Which one is it?
Here, top of the stairs.
We'll take the liberty of looking in. Miss Victor hasn't been seen since last night. Uh-huh. Unlocked.
Lord, what a mess. Clothes strewn all over the place, open suitcases.
Yes, it
Look
looks
at
as if the young lady had been planning an immediate departure.
It should be. No one's seen her since last night.
Oh, I beg your pardon, gentlemen. I thought I heard Mary Victor come in. I'm Mrs. Wainwright.
Mrs. Wainwright, I'm afraid we have some rather bad news for you.
Your husband shot himself a quarter of an hour ago at the end of the pier, and his body fell into the sea.
Is he dead?
We must presume so, madam. I left the police sergeant there searching for him. Sergeant Blake should be back here any moment now.
So he did. After all.
You don't seem very surprised, madam.
He threatened to do it.
Mrs. Wainwright, before your husband shot himself, he confessed to committing a murder in this inn last night.
A murder? Whose murder?
At the moment, we're not quite sure.
Oh, he must have been out of his mind.
Mrs. Wainwright, I'm afraid I must ask you some rather painful questions. Are you aware that your husband was a criminal, that he served a prison sentence under the name of Wilson?
Yes, I knew that. He told me when we were married 2 years ago. But he said that he'd gone straight ever since he'd come out of prison. That's why he changed his name. He was trying to make a fresh start.
You know of no reason for his planning to kill anyone at this inn?
None. And unless you find someone murdered, I wouldn't give too much thought to it.
Yes, if you'll forgive my saying so, madam, you seem remarkably unmoved by your husband's tragedy.
Why should I pretend? We were very unhappy together. This might be the best way out of it for both of us.
Oh, my soul.
My husband carried quite a large amount of life insurance. In the event of suicide, would that be payable?
And on the policy, madam, then I must say that from your attitude, I begin to doubt whether your husband is dead.
What do you mean?
I mean that if Mr. Wilson, or if you prefer it, Mr. Wainwright, wished to disappear in spectacular style, what could be simpler than to pretend to shoot himself, drop into the sea...
Mr. Holmes! Mr. Holmes!
I'm up here, Sergeant. Ah, did you find him?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. We fished him out right away. Dead as a doornail. Shot himself to the head, he did.
Well, that disposes of your last theory, Holmes.
Did you find the revolver, Sergeant?
Yes, ma'am. Got it right here with me. One bullet missing. Have you found out if anyone here's been murdered, Mr.
I
Holmes?
found out very little as yet. Wait a moment. Listen.
I don't hear anything.
Exactly, you hear nothing. Yet we're within a few feet of the Wainwright's room.
What do you mean, Mr. Holmes?
I mean that there is one sound we should be hearing very clearly at the moment. Why didn't I think of it before? The sound of your canaries chirruping. You've heard little else for days. Come on, Watson.
Where are you going?
Your room, madam. I'm afraid I must dispense with asking your permission.
You're already in my room. It seems a little late even to mention the subject.
Here's the bird cage, the windowsill. Oh, the birds are gone.
No, old chap. If you look more closely, you'll see them on the bottom of the cage.
Let me open this door and get one of them out. By Jove, Holmes. They're dead.
And yet when we entered the inn a few minutes ago, they were still chirruping.
But who on earth would want to kill a couple of birds?
That, my dear fellow, is one of the things we have to find out. So far, I must admit, I'm puzzled. We have a self-confessed murderer, and the nearest thing we can find to a corpse is a pair of dead canaries.
We'll bring you the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second. A second I'll take, if you don't mind, to ask you if you've ever had a glass of Petri California sherry. Because if you haven't, boy, you want to remedy that situation pronto. Try that Petri sherry before dinner some evening. Look at its clear amber color. Smell the fragrance of those luscious grapes. And get a sample of that Petri flavor. That Petri sherry can turn the usual before-dinner lull into a main event. And say, if you like your sherry dry, as I do, wait till you taste Petri Pale Dry Sherry. Is that ever good? But after all, when it's a Petri wine, it's always a good wine. And now, back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. Strange events are taking place in the Kentish fishing village of Kingsgate. A self-confessed murderer has committed suicide, but his victim cannot be found. As we rejoin our story, the great detective and his old friend Dr. Watson are once again examining the room of Mary Victor, one of the missing guests.
You know, Holmes, the murder that Wilson confessed to before he committed suicide might have been the killing of those two canaries.
I think not, old chap. Wilson obviously loved the creatures and kept them in spite of the fact that they were dangerously apt to identify him with his criminal past. Uh-huh. Very interesting.
Huh? What have you found?
This note lying on Miss Victor's dressing table. Yeah.
Have a look. You think you can hide from me, Mary, but you can't. Wherever I go, I shall follow you. So why not get wise to yourself and stop running away? Sounds as if the poor girl was in danger, all right.
Possibly, but the writer of that note was certainly obliging. Though the letter is unsigned, he at least gives us a clue to his identity.
Oh, what clue?
The phrase, get wise to yourself, is very un-English. It's American. Come on, old chap.
Well, where are we going now?
The envelope to this letter has the Kingsgate postmark on it. I should be surprised if that fount of all knowledge, the village postmistress, can't help us find an American visitor.
Yes, I know the young man you must be looking for, gentlemen. His name's Walter C. Bunker. He's been in here to send telegrams, and his accent's so strong you could cut it with a knife. Just like one of the Red Indian fellows you read about, you know.
Can you tell me where he lives, madam?
Well, that I can, sir. He's been rooming at Mrs. Bell's house, 15 Laburnum Grove, down behind the gas works.
15 Laburnum Grove, Mrs. Bell. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very much obliged to you. Mrs. Bell?
Yes, sir. What can I do for you, gentlemen?
Well, we understand that Mr. Walter Bunker has been staying with you, madam.
That he has. A nice young American gentleman.
Is he at home, may I ask?
No, sir. And I'm worried about him. This morning, when he goes out, he asks me where the nearest cemetery is.
Cemetery? Gracious me. Huh?
I tell him, and then he gives a queer kind of laugh. I'm not sure I'll see you anymore, he says. And then he walks off, and I haven't seen him since. I tell you, I'm worried about him, gentlemen.
And where is the nearest cemetery, Mrs. Bell, the one you directed him to?
About 3 miles from here, just beside a Branson Wood.
Thank you, madam. Come on, Watson. The cemetery seems deserted. Shh. It's really coming from the church.
Good Lord, it's a funeral.
Or a wedding. Come on.
By Jove, it is a wedding, Holmes.
I'm afraid we're on the false trail, but we'd better make sure. question. Can you tell me the names of the couple who've just been married?
Miss Mary Victor from the inn, and a young American by the name of Bunker.
Thank you. Yes, we have been following a false trail, confound it. The frightened young lady was merely frightened by her persistent American fiancé.
Threatening letter that he sent her.
Ambiguously worded, when you come to think of it. Anyway, we can cease to worry about Miss Victor. She is now Mrs. Bunker. I think we can assume that she's out of all danger.
We've got to start all over again.
Oh, no, my dear fellow. The field is narrowing. We'll head back to the inn now, and I have a feeling that we're on the last lap of our strange adventure. Yes, here's another suspect eliminated. This telegram is from my brother Mycroft. I telegraphed him earlier on today to check on the movements of Basil Carter, the young man who left the inn so mysteriously in the early hours of this morning. His answer informs me that the gentleman in question was recalled to the Foreign Office suddenly and arrived quite safely a few hours ago.
Well, now I'm completely puzzled.
And I, old fellow, at last see daylight.
Wish I did, Mr. Holmes.
Sergeant, go upstairs and get the dead man's widow and bring her to my room, please.
Right.
And then I think I can give you the solution to this problem.
What do you want with me, Mr. Holmes?
Sit down, madam. You and Sergeant Blake make yourselves comfortable. Now, in the first place, the murder occurred this morning and not last night.
I know what you're hinting at. The canaries. I admit I killed them. But you can't do anything to me for that.
Why did you kill those birds?
I hated them as much as my husband loved them. And when I knew he was dead, their singing drove me mad. So I killed them.
But they must have been already dead when we told you of your husband's suicide.
True, Watson, but the lady was fully aware that her husband was dead when we informed her of the fact. You see, she murdered him.
You're talking rubbish.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. How could she have murdered him? We saw him shoot himself before our eyes.
Because when Wilson raised that revolver to his head, he was convinced that it contained blank cartridges. Unfortunately for him, his wife had deliberately replaced the blanks with live cartridges.
But great heavens, why? How?
Let me reconstruct the case for you. Wilson, with the connivance of his wife here, had contrived a disappearance plot. He knew that I had spotted his real identity, and so he planned this rather dramatic exit. Confessed to a non-existent murder, and then, well, had his plan materialized, he was to shoot himself with a blank. Fall from the pier, an apparent suicide.
What a fantastic scheme, but how did he plan to get away?
Well, he would have swum under the water, safe distance, and so made his escape.
Oh, his plan couldn't have worked possibly.
No, probably not. But at least it was ingenious. He would have destroyed his true identity and had his revenge on me by making me search for a murder that had never been committed. Unfortunately for him, his wife was his accomplice and saw in the scheme an excellent way of killing her husband.
You think you're so very clever, Mr. Holmes, but even if it were true, how could you prove it?
Observe this revolver, Mrs. Wilson. It's the one your husband shot himself with.
What can you prove from that?
Ever hear of fingerprint tests?
I've heard of them. But that revolver's been underwater.
True, quite true. But thanks to the researches of my excellent friend, Dr. John Thorndyke, an infallible test has been discovered for recording fingerprints even after immersion in seawater. I applied the test to the prints on the revolver and the bullets and compared them with some that we found on the water glass in your room. They are the same, Mrs. Wilson. Now, does a man let his wife load his suicide weapon? Sergeant Blake, I think it's obvious that the time has come for you to take over the case.
All right, so I did change the bullets. I hated him. I'm glad he's dead. What's more, I'd do it again.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes, Sergeant Blake?
Well, now that I've taken Mrs. Wilson to the station and booked her on a murder charge, I wonder if you'd mind answering a question.
With pleasure.
This fingerprint
Ah.
test. I'd like to know about that. I never heard of being able to take prints after a revolver has been handled 2 or 3 times and soaked in salt water.
Yes, Holmes, and I'd like to know when you performed the test and took the prints off the glass in her room. I thought that I was with you all the time.
You were, my dear fellow.
Well, then,
I can give you the answer in one word. Bluff.
What?
There is no such test, my dear Watson. It would be almost impossible to expect clear prints after so much handling, and totally impossible after submersion. Fortunately for us, though, Mrs. Wilson was gullible enough to believe me and give me a confession.
And there's no such person as Dr. John Thorndyke?
Oh, yes, indeed there is. He had great success last year in the case of the red thumb mark.
You didn't tell me about that case, Holmes?
No, I didn't. It was deliberate, old chap. With your taste for writing sensational stories, I was afraid you might publish the affair.
Huh? Would it have mattered if I had?
Oh, yes, it would.
Huh?
You'd have given away, what shall I say, professional secrets. You'd have provided the public, and in particular, the criminal public, with a complete education on fingerprints. And when that happens, my dear Watson, we shall have no tricks left. That will be a sad day for detectives.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of Wisteria Lodge. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petri family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invites you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective Sherlock Holmes.
It began on a summer evening in 1906. I'd been for a long walk in the park, I remember, when I returned to Baker Street and entered our rooms. Holmes looked up at me with a twinkle and spoke.
You're positively glowing with health, Watson.
Well, I had a splendid walk, my dear fellow. You should have come with me. The park was looking particularly beautiful.
Well, chap, during your absence, I've decided to write another monograph.
Oh, what's the subject this time?
Occupational liability to murder. For instance, the mortality rate is naturally high among policemen and detectives. Physicians are murdered with fair regularity, but the murder of a dentist is rare. And who ever heard of a murdered veterinary surgeon?
That's quite true, but what's the occasion for this little homily?
I've been browsing over my newspaper clippings.
Yeah?
You recall ever hearing of a murdered tobacconist, Watson?
No, I can't say that I do.
Oh, why? And yet my clippings inform me that no less than 3 tobacconists have been murdered in the past 6 months, and all the murders have occurred in the same small shop at the East End of London. Now, why do you suppose 3 tobacconists would be murdered in the same shop? Come now, old fellow. Give me a logical solution to the problem, will you?
Well, let me see. You say that the shop's in the East End?
Yes.
Is it near the river?
As it happens, it's on the water's edge.
And supposing the tobacconist shop was the headquarters of a smuggling ring. Perhaps boxes of cigars were unloaded from the dock and brought to the shop. Cigars containing pearls or opium or something.
Watson, my dear fellow, you're doing splendidly. You must walk in the park more frequently. You're positively scintillating.
Oh, no, you're making fun of me.
I assure you I'm not.
You're expecting anyone home?
No, probably a visitor from Mrs. Hudson. Go on with your fascinating theory. Now, why are 3 tobacconists murdered?
Well, because they know too much. Perhaps they demand a share on the profits, so the head of the ring decides to kill them.
Plausible enough, Watson. I really must congratulate you. I can see that I'm very lucky in having a biographer with such a lively imagination.
Thanks very much.
Come in.
That's very nice for you. Imagination. Oh, hello, Lestrade.
Lestrade, I'm glad to see you.
I hope I'm not intruding.
Not at all, my dear fellow. Come along, sit down.
Thank you, Miss Holmes.
Anything remarkable on hand?
Oh, no, Miss Holmes. Nothing very particular.
Ah, then tell me all about it, Lestrade.
Can't hide anything from you, can I, sir? Yes, there is something on my mind, and no mistake.
And it concerns the 3 murdered tobacconists, I see. Splendid.
Now, how the blazes did you know that?
Yes, Holmes, that's pure magic.
Not at all, my dear Watson. It's simple deduction.
Deduction?
Observe the 5 cigars peering out of Lestrade's breast pocket. They are of a far superior quality to his usual brand. Obviously, the scene of his latest investigation has proffered certain, well, shall we say, professional perquisites. Am I right, Lestrade?
Of course you are. Careful one, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, no, I'll stick to my pipe.
Well, how about you, Doctor?
Oh, thank you, Lestrade. By Jove. Coronas.
And now, Inspector, tell me about the murdered tobacconists.
Well, how much do you know about the case?
Just what I've read in the papers.
Well, curiously enough, we were discussing the affair as you walked in, Lestrade.
It's a strange business, gentlemen. I only got hold of the old story today when I had a long talk to young Jack Longworth. He's the owner of the shop.
When in relation to Gerald Longworth, the taller member of Parliament who battled so successfully against the slum clearance bill?
His son, Mr. Holmes.
What's that?
Nice young fellow, too. When his father died, he inherited this shop along with a lot of other property in the East End.
Well, how big a shop is it, Lestrade?
Oh, just a hole in the wall, Doctor, like all the other shops in that part of London. Young Mr. Longworth tells me he first rents it to a man by the name of George Grillet. He lives there with his daughter Lily and made it quite a nice go out of the shop. 6 months ago, when Jack Longworth was abroad, George Grillet has a stroke and nearly kicks the bucket.
Kicks the what?
He nearly dies, Doctor.
Oh, kicks the bucket. That's very good. I remember that.
And then what happened, Lestrade?
Well, while he's in the hospital, his daughter gives up the lease on the shop. A few days later, an Italian takes it over, and a couple of weeks later, he's found with his throat cut.
Did you investigate that first murder yourself?
No, Mr. Holmes. It seemed like any of a dozen killings we get in that part of London. A shopkeeper cut up, his till emptied, no clues.
Well, who was the next tenant?
A Scotchman. Bloke by the name of Mackintosh. A few weeks after he moved in, the same thing happened to him. That time, I did go down there, but I couldn't find out nothing.
Was robbery again the apparent motive?
Yes, sir. But the killing wasn't the same. He was strangled with a silk scarf.
Silk scarf, eh? And who was the third tenant? The man who was murdered yesterday?
A Hindu fella. A man by the name of Mukherjee. He takes it over a week last Friday, and yesterday we finds him knifed through the back and his money gone. Of course, I was down there before you could say Crystal Palace. But once again, I didn't find out nothing. No knife, no fingerprints on the till, no footprints. Just a very dead Hindu.
Was young Mr. Longworth a landlord in England when these murders occurred?
Yeah, that's the funny thing about it, Mr. Holmes. He docked at Tilbury yesterday morning. He didn't know nothing about what had been going on.
Well, I imagine he'll have difficulty in renting the shop after 3 murders.
Well, that's just it, Doctor. That's why he comes to me at the yard. George Grillet, his first tenant of the shop, moved back there today with his daughter Lily. Young Mr. Longworth's worried about them. Well, if you ask me, he's more worried about the daughter than he is about old man Grillet.
So the original tenants of the shop are back in residence again, eh? And, what do you want me to do?
Well, I thought perhaps you'd be interested enough to come along with me and look at the shop, Mr. Holmes.
I should be very glad to, my dear fellow. Get your coat and hat, Watson.
Oh, that's right. Oh, dear, that wretched instrument.
I'll answer it. Hello? Mycroft, how are you? What? Yes. Yes, he's here now. Why, of course. I'll do everything I can, certainly. Let's have dinner together soon, shall we? Splendid idea. All right, goodbye.
Well, is that your brother, Holmes?
Yes. Lestrade, I do think you might have told me the whole truth.
Well, how do you mean, sir?
I thought your visit was prompted by a need for friendly assistance. I didn't realize that you came here virtually on a government order.
Well, it wasn't just quite like that, Mr.
What's
Holmes.
the government got to do with the case, and how does your brother Mycroft fit into the picture?
Not sure yet. But of one thing we may be certain. There's obviously a great deal more in this case than Lestrade would have us believe.
Why do you say that, Holmes?
You must bear in mind, old fellow, that occasionally Mycroft is the British government.
Nice part of London to take a walk in on a foggy night, ain't it, gentlemen? All our policemen work down here in pairs, you know.
Yes, I don't blame them. It's a vile neighborhood.
There's the shop just ahead of us, with a sign hanging out. Hello, there he is again.
Oh.
See that bearded Hindu skulking off around the corner there?
Oh, yeah.
He's been haunting the place ever since I came down here.
So a bearded Hindu haunts the place, eh?
Yes, and yesterday, Holmes, the Hindu proprietor of the shop was murdered.
Exactly.
Well, here we are. I'll go in first.
Depressing looking place, huh?
Copy that, Jiffy?
That's Lily, George Grillet's daughter. Helps him with the shop.
Sorry to keep you wet. Oh,
Oh, it's you, Inspector Lestrade.
Yes, Miss Lily. I brought some gentlemen to see your father. This is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
Pleased to meet you, I'm sure.
How do you do, Miss Grillet?
How do you do, young lady?
Is your dad home?
No, Inspector, he won't be in till after dinner. Went down to the docks, he did, to see about some cigar shipments. Mr. Longworth's here. If you want to see him, we were just having some tea in the back room.
Yes, I'd like these gentlemen to meet him.
Jack, come out in the shop, Jack.
What is it, Lily? Oh, Inspector Lestrade. And this must be Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, I'm sure.
How do you do, sir?
Hi, Mr. Longworth.
I'm very glad the inspector was able to persuade you to come down here, Mr. Holmes. I'm dreadfully worried about this business, particularly since Lily's father insisted on coming back here. I'm afraid they're in great danger, but I can't make Mr. Grillet see it.
Young lady, I wonder if I might ask you a few questions.
Yeah, of course, Mr. Holmes.
Before your father had his stroke, did he receive any threats concerning his occupancy of the shop?
Well, if he did, he never told me about him. But it wouldn't surprise me. I often told him his biggest enemy is himself. If you know what I mean.
Yes, I think I do, Miss Grillet. When your father had his illness, who decided to give up the lease on the shop?
I did. No money was coming in, and, well, it looked like Dad might be an invalid for life. But, of course, I couldn't run the shop by myself. Anyhow, I never did like this part of London. And it wasn't the right business for Father.
What was his reaction when you told him to have given up the lease?
Oh, he was awful angry with me. Said I'd no right to do it without asking him.
By the way, we saw that bearded Hindu again as we walked up just now.
Been hanging around ever since we came back here, Inspector.
Well, has he actually come into the shop, Miss Grillet?
No, but he keeps walking by and looking in the window. I'm sure if we both went into the back room or left the shop for a little while, well, he'd come right in.
Then I suggest we give him the opportunity he's seeking. Miss Grillet, I wonder if you and Mr. Longworth would mind leaving the shop for a while.
Of course not, Mr. Holmes.
Make your departure rather ostentatious, shall we say, so that he can't help noticing it. Give us half an hour or so and then come back. Perhaps you wouldn't mind going with them, Lestrade.
But, Mr. Holmes, this is my case.
I know, but in a situation like this, Watson and I work much better alone. We may have to go a little outside the law, and your presence might embarrass us.
You'd never think I was a detective, too, would you?
Very well,
We'll be back
Mr.
in half an hour.
Poor old Lestrade. He gets very touchy as the years roll by.
Yeah, I blame him. I'm leaving him completely in the dark. Come on, Watson. Behind the counter. No, my dear fellow. Not under it, old chap. We lift the flap. So. Now it's just we crouch down behind here. Come on. That's it. Have you got your revolver, Watson?
Yes, it's in my pocket.
Good. Meantime, make yourself as comfortable as these cramped quarters will permit. We may have quite a wait ahead of us.
Look, Holmes. There's the Hindu now. Peering through the window. Yes, sir. Here he comes.
All right, Watson.
Put your hands up. I got you covered with this revolver. Now, my man, what are you doing here?
Who are you?
Never mind who I am. Just answer my question.
I do not speak very good English.
तुम हिंदुस्तानी बात बोल नहीं सकता?
सकता है।
कि तुम इधर आया?
देखने को आस्ती तुम्हारा भाई हमको हुक्म दिया।
तुम्हारा भाई? तुम जा नहीं सकता?
बहुत अच्छा।
No, you don't, my man. Just you stay where you are.
It's all right, Watson. Let him go. He's on our side.
I wish you'd tell me what in thunder's going on. Who that man was and why you let him go.
He's an investigator from the Foreign Office, old chap. Given his instructions by my brother, Mycroft.
Mycroft?
Yes, old fellow. When my brother fails to tell me all the facts concerning this case, I begin to think these triple murders have far greater ramifications than we ever dreamed of.
Dr. Watson's story will continue in just a second. Just about time enough for me to mention that any meal becomes a better meal when you serve it with Petri wine. And say, you'll find that Petri California Burgundy and Petri California Sauterne are just made to go with food. That Petri Burgundy is a rich red wine that's bosom pals with any meat or meat dish. Boy, what a flavor. And that Petri Sauterne is the delicate white wine that's just perfect with chicken or with fish. Yes, sir, with food, You just can't beat a good Petri wine. And now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. A puzzling case is occupying the attentions of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. 3 murders have taken place in a small tobacconist shop in the East End of London. As we rejoin our story, it's late at night, and Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, accompanied by Inspector Lestrade, are once again walking toward the hill-facing shop.
Well, I don't see that you've accomplished much, Mr. Holmes, except that you've just bought me a nice dinner.
Oh, we're making progress, Lestrade. If only by the elimination of obvious suspects. But there's a pattern to this case, and that should give us a clue.
Well, how do you mean, Holmes?
My dear fellow, consider the obvious motive of these murders, and particularly observe the results they've obtained.
Well, the motive was the same in all 3 killings, robbery.
Oh, no, Lestrade. Don't let the theft of a few pounds from the till blind you to the real motive.
Look. Here's Miss Grillet now. He's coming out of the shop.
Good evening, Miss Grillet.
Hello, Mr. Holmes.
Is your father home yet?
Yes, he is, Mr. Holmes. Well, I can't tell you how anxious I am for you to talk to him. I'm going to meet Mr. Longworth. He's taken me to the music hall. I should be home just after 10. I hope you'll be able to stay with Dad until then.
Well, don't you worry, Miss Grillet. We'll keep an eye on him.
Oh, thanks ever so much. Oh, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, Miss Grillet?
Please don't go into our rooms in the back, will you? I've left things in a frightful mess.
I quite understand, Miss Grillet.
Well, ta-ta. See you later.
Let's go into the shop.
Who is it? Oh, it's you, Inspector.
Yeah, these gentlemen, Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
Oh, how do you do, sir?
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Did you meet young Lily just now?
Yes, she told us she was going out to the music hall with Mr. Longworth.
Yes. I'm afraid we had quite a set to about that. A very strong-willed girl, Lily, very strong-willed.
Am I to assume that you disapprove of your daughter's association with Mr. Longworth?
Yes, of course I do. He's a toff. He's got lots of money. Lily's so blind she can't see that he's up to no good. I'm pretty sure he's afraid I might find out what's really at the back of these here murders.
And what is your theory, sir?
Well, I'll tell you this in confidence. Got nothing to back it up now, you understand. There's been talk of widening the docks around here. That'd make property values go up, you see, of course. Well, young Longworth's been trying to buy up all the other shops along the waterfront here, but they wouldn't sell. If you ask me, he's had these murders done just to frighten people away so that he could buy cheap. Now, I'm not saying that he did the murders himself, you understand, but he planned it. Why, in these parts, it's easy enough any night to get a throat cut for a couple of quid.
Yeah.
That's why I'm glad you're here, gents. You see, I just got another warning.
Warning? What do you mean, sir, warning?
Found this note slipped under that door there not 3/4 of an hour ago.
Let me see it, please.
Huh.
What does it say, Holmes?
I shall call on you at 8:30 tonight. You know what's good for you. You'll be waiting for me alone. Try any funny tricks, you'll go where I sent the rest of them.
Well, that's obviously been the killer.
Possibly. What's the time now?
It's 8:20.
I was hoping you gentlemen would wait in our rooms back of the shop. You can hear what's going on in here, and if he tries any rough stuff, you can pop in and nab him.
Just what I was about to suggest myself, Mr. Grillet. Either way, will you?
Oh, yes. Just step behind the counter, gents. Now, through here. Here we are. Ain't exactly Buckingham Palace back here, but you can make yourselves comfortable, can't you, gents?
Oh, don't you worry about us, Grillet.
Oh, I better turn out the gas. If this bloke spots a light under the door in here, he might smell a rat. There we are. Now, as soon as I see him coming in the shop, I'll knock twice on the door, like this. And that'll give you the signal that he's here. Is that right?
Right, you are, Grillet.
All right, now keep your ears open, gents. I may need your help.
Where are you, Holmes? You can't see a thing.
Over here, Watson.
You know, I've got another theory why Jack Longworth might be at the back of all this. You listening, Holmes? Longworth knows that Grillet doesn't approve of his having anything to do with Lily. So when he goes abroad, he leaves instructions to murder the tobacconist. The assassins don't know about Grillet having a stroke, of course, so they keep murdering the wrong fellow.
Well, that makes very good sense, Doctor. What do you say, Mr. Holmes?
Holmes. Holmes. Where are you? That's Marcelis. disappeared.
No, I haven't. I was just exploring. Shh.
There goes the front door. Somebody's come in. We'd better go in. We've got to get in there at once.
Open the door. Oh, it's locked. Never mind that. Get your shoulders into it. Come on, help me. On here. Come on, one more.
Poor devil. Been slashed with a knife. Willett!
What, the killer got away? I'm going
No, Lestrade, conserve your energy. Your murderer lies there.
But that's Grillet.
Of course it is. Search his pockets, Watson. I think you'll find a blood-stained knife.
Let's have a look. Good Lord. He has a razor in his pocket. It's covered with blood. You mean to say that he slashed himself?
Let's slip the handcuffs on him, Lestrade. While he's still play-acting, he may be more difficult to handle when he realizes the game's up.
Take your hands off
Quick,
of me.
come on, quick. Come on here.
Hey.
Come on. Very neat, Lestrade.
Yeah. Well, now that I've knocked a wounded man out cold, perhaps you'll tell me what's going on, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, I'm completely in the dark, too.
Oh, it's very simple, really. Grillet has just staged a fake attack on himself. Fool us into believing that someone else is the murderer.
Yeah, but the threatening note he received...
Composed by himself for the occasion.
Yes, but we heard voices. We heard the shop door open.
We heard Grillet talking to himself. And as for the shop door, that's how he gave himself away.
Well, how do you mean, Mr. Holmes?
Whenever the shop door opens, there's a bell that jangles. You will notice, so.
Yeah, that's right, there is.
There was no bell jangle when we were in the back room. Grillet got us in there, locked the door on us unobtrusively, and staged his little drama.
Yes, but we heard the door creak open and close, Mr. Holmes.
The creak of this flap in the counter would sound exactly the same, my dear fellow. Now listen.
Yes, but why, Holmes? How did you spot that Grillet was a man?
It was obvious from the beginning that since nothing had changed about the shop except the ownership, that the attackers were directed against any tobacconist who was not Grillet himself. Of course, his daughter, Lily, obviously knew what was going on.
Well, I don't see how you figured that one out, Mr. Holmes.
Every remark that she made showed that although she loved her father, she knew his failings. In any case, she gave me the final clue.
Well, what clue was that?
In very pointedly asking me not to go into the back room of the shop. Of course, she meant the reverse of what she said. I followed her advice when you were explaining your theory to Lestrade.
Well, what did you find, Mr. Holmes?
Miss Grillet had obligingly left a secret door open, a door leading to a passageway that seemed to go down to the waterfront. We'll examine it more thoroughly in a minute.
Yes, but I still don't understand Grillet's motive, Holmes.
Neither do I, old chap. No, I suspect that from the interest of the Foreign Office in the case, this shop has been the headquarters of an espionage ring. I'm afraid the final answer to that question will have to be given by someone else.
Oh, who, Holmes?
By my elder brother, Mycroft. Humiliating, isn't it, Watson?
And what was the final answer to the question, Dr. Watson?
Well, Holmes was right as usual, Mr. Foreman. The shop had been the headquarters of a spy ring operated by Grillet. And many international criminals had been smuggled in England or foreign ships moored up the river.
And did Mr. Grillet hang for his crime?
No, he didn't, my boy. Before he came to trial, he had another stroke and he died.
Probably just as well for his daughter's sake.
Oh, his daughter. Yes, a lovely girl.
Did she marry Longworth?
Indeed, she did. As a matter of fact, I danced at her wedding. It was a very wonderful wedding reception. See, you would have been there yourself, Mr. Foreman. In fact, you'd have liked it very much. They served a pretty good wine.
Was it a Petri wine by any chance?
Well, it was so good it easily might have been.
You mean because Petri wine is the kind of a wine you can't forget?
That's exactly what I do.
Well, that's because the Petri family really knows all there is to know about the fine art of turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine. You see, the Petri family's been making wine ever since they started the Petri business way back in the 1800s. And they've been able to hand on down in the family from father to son, every bit of their skill and experience. That's why Petri wine is so good today, because Petri took time to bring you good wine. And say, don't forget to take a moment yourself and send for your free recipe calendar. Remember, send to Petri Wine, San Francisco 26, California. This offer is intended to apply only in those states and other localities where its acceptance is permissible by law and regulation. And now, Doctor, do you feel like giving us a hint about next week's story?
Yes, I do. Next week, Mr. Foreman, I'm going to tell you a strange adventure that happened to Holmes and me in the West End of London. It concerns the death of a famous actor who was portraying the part of an equally famous man, Sherlock Holmes.
Thank you, Doctor. See you next week. And say, from the news we've had so far today, maybe by next week at this time we'll hear some really good news from Europe.
I certainly hope so, Mr. Foreman. But let us remember the war won't be over when Germany quits. We've still got to lick Japan. That's going to take a long time. So instead of celebrating when VE Day comes along, let's just strengthen our resolve to support the war more than ever here at home. Keep that war job. Don't leave it till you're released. Keep on buying more and more and more war bonds and keep them. Don't turn them in. Help all you can with all home front activities and observe all our wartime regulations such as price ceiling. That's the real way to celebrate a victory in Europe, by working harder to end the war in the Pacific.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of the Six Napoleons. Mr. Rathbone appears with the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce with the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Meanwhile, don't forget to take advantage of our offer of a free recipe calendar.
Oh, the Petri family took the time to bring you such good wine. So when you eat and when you cook, remember Petri wine.
To make good food taste better, remember...
Petri wine.
This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petri family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective Sherlock Holmes. I suppose your dinner is well over by now, so now's the perfect time to get out a bottle of that swell Petri California port. You know, Petri port was just made for a time like this, after dinner when you're just taking things easy. If you've ever tasted Petri port, you know what I mean. It's a hearty, full-bodied wine with a deep red color and a flavor that's just about out of this world. I think that if you had only one wine to choose and the whole world to choose from, chances are you'd pick port. Petri port. That's how good I think it is. That's saying plenty, I know, but I think Petri port will easily live up to all I say about it. Try it and see, and share it with your friends. You can serve Petri port proudly because the name Petri is the proudest name in the history of American wines. And now let's visit our old friend, Dr. Watson.
I'm out here on the patio, Mr. Foreman. Come on out and join me.
Admiring the sunset, eh, Doctor?
Yes, my boy. It's a particularly beautiful one.
Where are the puppies this evening?
Asleep on a favorite tweed coat of mine that's just come back from the cleaner.
And you hadn't the heart to move them, I suppose.
No, I hadn't. The little fellows looked so comfortable. In fact, I sometimes wonder if these... that you haven't come here to listen to a dissertation on the behavior of dogs.
Well, it is getting near story time, Doctor.
Yes, of course it is. Well, just let me get my pipe properly lighted. Ah, that's it. The story I'm going to tell you tonight began in 1909. I received a telegram from my old friend telling me that he was leaving his Sussex bee farm and coming to London for a few days. I hadn't seen the great man for several months, so naturally I went to Victoria Station to meet him. As the train drew to a stop, The door of a first-class carriage swung open, and Sherlock Holmes, hand outstretched, jumped down onto the platform to greet me.
Watson, my dear fellow, how are you?
Oh, Holmes, my dear fellow, it's good to see you again. I've missed you.
And are you, old chap?
Harry a bag, sir?
Yes, Porter, and get us a hansom cab, will you?
Right, Chalk, Governor.
I wish I'd got a spare room for you.
Don't worry, Watson. I shall be very comfortable at the Diogenes Club. By the way, I trust you're free this evening.
Yes, naturally. What are your plans?
I thought we'd go to the theatre.
Theatre? Oh, what play do you want to see?
Oh, I thought we'd go to the Savoy Theatre and see the Sherlock Holmes play. I hear it's enormously successful.
Yes, I know it is, but I've avoided it. I'm told that Sir Claude Horton takes great liberties with your character, and as for the actor portraying me, my friends tell me it's a travesty. He makes me nothing but a bumbling old fool.
Therefore, a visit to the play might be a salutary experience for both of us. In any case, my trip to London is a response to an urgent telegram from Sir Claude himself. Seems to need my help rather badly.
Oh, what's his trouble?
Well, he wasn't specific in his telegram. He suggested, however, that we attend tonight's performance and discuss the matter with him afterwards.
I see. Well, I suppose if you can sit through it, I can.
Of course you can, old fellow. In any case, you yourself are partly responsible for the play's existence.
How do you mean, Holmes?
Those sensational stories you wrote of my modest problems, I should have seen where they would eventually lead to. In time, no doubt, we shall be portrayed on the cinematograph as well.
Nonsense, Holmes. That newfangled thing's only a toy.
I think not, Watson. We're on the edge of a strange new mechanical world. In fact, I begin to feel a certain concern about the rumored developments in wireless telegraphy. But enough of these predictions. Here comes our porter with a cab. We'll tell the driver to take us straight to the Savoy Theatre.
Just look at that line of people at the box office, Holmes.
Very flattering, old chap.
Well, possibly, but I hope it doesn't mean that we've got to wait our turn and...
Excuse me, gentlemen. You're Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, aren't you?
Yes.
I thought I couldn't be mistaken. My name is Frank Ferris.
How do you do, Mr. Ferris?
I'm glad to meet you, sir.
Sir Claude has a box reserved for you. He asked me to see that you are quite comfortable.
Very considerate of him.
Will you follow me, please?
Thank you.
Neither of you has seen the play before, I understand.
No, Mr. Ferris, we haven't.
I imagine it'll be a strange experience seeing yourselves portrayed on the stage. By the way, I'm playing the part of an old friend of yours, Professor Moriarty.
Oh, indeed. I'm looking forward to a very entertaining evening. I presume that you escape our clutches, as usual?
Yes, I do, Mr. Holmes. And I've done it nightly now for 137 performances.
A record that I'm sure Professor Moriarty himself would envy. Had it not been for his memorable demise at the Reichenbach Falls.
Ah, here we are, gentlemen. This is the box reserved for you. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'll go back to my dressing room. Oh, I nearly forgot, Mr. Holmes. Sir Claude asked me to give you this note.
Thank you.
No, not at all. Well, I'll see you later.
Very nice fellow for an actor.
Don't be a snob, Watson.
Well, what does the Claude note say?
I'll read it to you. Dear Holmes, since I telegraphed you yesterday, there have been strange developments. In fact, I've been doing some detective work off stage as well as on. Watch the performance tonight and watch the audience too, particularly the occupant of the box opposite yours. Please come to my dressing room as soon as the last curtain has fallen.
He's being very mysterious, and the box opposite ours is empty.
No. Look, Watson, look. Someone has just entered. Confound it, the house lights are going out.
The first act's beginning, Holmes.
The first act, yes. Well, sit back and relax, old fellow. Let's see what they've done to us.
Well, and what did you think of the first act, Holmes?
Huh? Oh, the first act, yes. I was, examining the occupant of the box opposite ours. An attractive young lady, alone and unusually preoccupied in her program. In fact, one might assume that she was trying to hide her face.
Yes, but the play, don't you think it's ridiculous? Just imagine a crown jewel being stolen from the Tower of London.
Why not? It's been attempted many times.
Anyhow, you must admit that the actor who's portraying me behaves like a blithering idiot. And Sir Claude's interpretation of you is pretty far-fetched.
Far-fetched, but flattering, Watson. What poise, what suavity, and what a voice. I find myself thoroughly entertained.
You're a strange chap, Holmes. No accounting for your tastes.
Look, Watson, look. The back of the box over there.
Good Lord, I could have sworn a man dodged behind the curtains. I don't think the girl saw him, though.
Looked like a foreigner. I think as the young lady's alone, we'll take the liberty of joining her.
Oh, dash it, there go the lights again. The second act starting now.
And sit down, old fellow. We don't want to attract attention. We'll join her during the next intermission.
Yes, who is it? Who are you? What do you want with me?
My name is Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson.
How do you do, young lady?
I hope you'll forgive this intrusion, but Sir Claude requested that I keep an eye on you during the play tonight.
Please come in and sit down, won't you?
Thank you.
Oh, this is very kind of you.
You must forgive my abruptness just now. But I've just been watching Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson being impersonated on the stage. It's rather startling to have the real couple walk into my bar.
Yes, I quite understand. By the way, just before the curtain went up on the second act, I thought I noticed a man come into the back of this box and then disappear again. Were you aware of his presence?
No, I didn't see him. But I know who it is. He's been following me for weeks now.
Perhaps you'd like to tell us about it, Miss...
Henshaw. Alicia Henshaw. Yes, I would. As a matter of fact, that's why I'm here tonight. Sir Claude Horton's an old friend of my father's. I went to ask his advice. He did some investigating himself for a few days, and then he found himself a little out of his depth, so he decided to telegraph for you, Mr. Holmes. We were going to meet in his dressing room after the performance tonight.
Splendid. And now, Miss Henshaw, what is your story?
It's a strange one, Mr. Holmes, though I didn't realize just how strange until I first saw this play a few nights ago. You see, my story concerns a stolen ruby.
Good Lord, and tonight's play revolves around the same thing.
Exactly. I might as well tell you how it all started. My brother's an officer in the British Army stationed in Egypt. Early this year, he saved the life of a very important native personage in some uprising in Cairo and was rewarded with a magnificent ruby. This jewel he sent to my Uncle Timothy and me. Oh, we're the last of the Henshaws, you see.
Did your brother tell you the name of this personage?
He didn't know it, Mr. Holmes. Apparently, the whole affair was hushed up.
I see. Please continue.
Well, the trouble began shortly after Uncle Timothy and I received the ruby. A description of it was published in the papers, and a few days later a message came to us from an Egyptian, Muhammad Ali, laying claim to the stone as one stolen from his family years ago. He sent an expert to our house who examined the ruby under a lens, Mr. Holmes, and then tapped it with a hammer. It fell to pieces. It was a fraud.
Gracious me, an amazing thing.
I'm sure that's not the end of the story, Miss Henshaw.
Oh, no, Mr. Holmes. I wrote and told my brother what had happened. He became very suspicious and suggested that I investigate the credentials of the expert that examined the stone.
I think I can finish the story for you. The supposed expert was a jewel thief who substituted a paste ruby for the real one, destroyed the imitation, and walked off with the treasure. It's an old trick. Of course, you haven't been able to find any trace of the supposed expert.
Well, that's the funny part of it, Mr. Holmes. Uncle Timothy and I gave a description to the police, but it was a very vague one, I'm afraid. All the time, Uncle said the man reminded him of a colleague of his many years ago at the university, a professor of mathematics. He couldn't think of his name, but when we first saw the play a few nights ago, he was reminded of it. The name was Moriarty.
Moriarty?
But Moriarty's dead.
Miss Henshaw, you say you have been shadowed for some weeks.
Yes, by an Egyptian. They've stolen the ruby, Mr. Holmes. Why don't they leave me alone?
That, Miss Henshaw, represents a very fascinating problem, and one that I shall be most happy to help you solve.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr.
Oh,
Holmes.
there go the lights again. The last act.
Yes, the last act of this little play, but not, I fear, of Miss Henshaw's problems. Let's meet after the act in Sir Claude's dressing room, shall we?
Well, Holmes, how did you enjoy the play?
Very much, Sir Claude. May I introduce my old friend, Dr. Watson?
How do you do, Mr. Claude?
How are you, Doctor? I see you've already made the acquaintance of Miss Henshaw, and she, no doubt, has told you her troubles, eh?
Yes, Sir Claude. And Mr. Holmes has promised to help me.
Splendid. Tell me, Watson, how did you like the play?
It was very interesting, Sir Claude. Not quite accurate, of course.
Well, you have to allow us a little dramatic license, you know. What did you think of Rodney, the man who was portraying you, Doctor?
Well, since you mention it, I think the fellow needs to study diction. He mumbles so much I couldn't understand a word he said.
Oh, come now, old fellow. I think there are times when you're a little hard to understand yourself.
Oh, rubbish.
Sir Claude, I hope you'll meet us at the Diogenes Club, and then we can go out and have some supper.
Excellent idea. I'll join you there after I've taken off my makeup.
Splendid.
I think I should be going home now, Sir Claude. I gave my address to Mr. Holmes, so he knows where to get in touch with me.
Very well, Miss Henshaw, and don't worry. I shall give your problem my undivided attention.
I'll take you to your cab, my dear.
Oh, there's no need to, Sir Claude.
Nonsense, I insist.
Goodbye.
I'll be back in a moment, gentlemen.
Right, Miss Henshaw.
Good night, good night. Strange business, Holmes. What do you make of it all?
Very little as yet, but it's a fascinating problem.
Claude really seems to have identified himself with the character of Sherlock Holmes. He gave me the impression that he feels quite capable of solving the case by himself.
Hello. Claude hasn't left, has he?
Oh, no, Mr. Ferris. He's coming back in a moment.
How'd you like to play, gentlemen?
Very much. Your own performance as Moriarty was most convincing.
Yes, indeed, sir. Congratulations, congratulations. A couple of times there, I had a strange feeling that you really were Moriarty.
Well, that's very flattering, Doctor. Oh, hello. Well, it sounds as if there's some trouble at the stage door. Excuse me.
Come on, Watson, let's follow him.
Right. Hello, it's Claude. He seems upset about something.
Yes. What's happened, Sir Claude?
Oh, there you are, Holmes. I'd just seen Miss Henshaw off in her cab when a foreign-looking fellow came out of a doorway and got into another cab. I heard him tell the driver to follow her. I tried to stop him, but he got away.
Must be the same man that we saw in her box during the play.
Sir Claude, we have her address. I think we'll drive there at once and see that she's arrived safely. We'll join you later at the Diogenes Club.
Well, Holmes, here we go. Off on another adventure.
Yes, and one that may give us an opportunity of crossing swords with Moriarty once more.
Oh, Moriarty's dead. He was killed when you and he fell over the precipice in 91.
He was supposed to have been killed, just as I was, but his body was never found. It's impossible, or rather possible, that he returned to pour into the ears of Colonel Moran a story as unlikely and as true as the one I related to you on that April evening in 1894. One can never be sure of death, old chap, until one has touched the cold skin of a corpse.
Dr. Watson's story will continue in just a few seconds. Hardly time for me to tell you about a really great Petri wine. Petri California Muscatel. Did you ever walk through a vineyard early in the morning and pick a big, juicy muscat grape right off the vine? Mm-mm. If you've ever done that, then you know what to expect when you taste Petri Muscatel. Petri Muscatel is the color of golden sunshine with a flavor to match. Serve Petri Muscatel after dinner some evening, or serve it any time friends drop in. It's a wonderful way to express your hospitality with a wonderful wine, a Petri wine. And now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. The famous pair have become involved in a strange mystery concerning a stolen ruby, a frightened girl, and an Egyptian who appears to be shadowing her. As we rejoin our story, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are standing in a darkened alleyway adjoining the girl's house.
Holmes, look. That Egyptian fellow. He's pacing up and down in front of our house.
Yes, therefore we may assume she's safely inside. Uh-huh. Seems to be giving up.
He's coming this way.
Flatten yourself against the wall. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Who are you, please?
We are friends of Miss Henshaw, and we're very curious to know why you've been following her.
I'm sorry that I cannot answer your question, sir.
Now, look here, my man. You're talking to Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
You are a Mr. Sherlock Holmes? I'm greatly honored to meet you, sir. All my life I have known of you. All my life I have admired you.
Then in that case, perhaps you'll answer my questions. Why have you been following Miss Henshaw?
Because it is my duty.
What do you mean, your duty?
Perhaps I should have said my destiny, Mr. Holmes. For 2 generations now, the family of Arabi, of which I am a humble member, have dedicated their lives to finding the stolen treasure of Asyut.
What on earth's all that got to do with Miss Henshaw?
The treasure of Asyut is a giant ruby. It was stolen many years ago from the family of Muhammad Ali. A few months ago, Miss Henshaw received a mysterious ruby. I have found out many things, Mr. Holmes. I have many sources of information.
Then I must regard you in the light of a rival detective in this case.
I hardly call myself a detective, Mr. Holmes. My life is dedicated to only one problem. Miss Henshaw now says the jewel was stolen from her. I do not believe it. That is why I watch her. If I am wrong this time, and I do not think I am wrong, then my quest must go on. Always it will go on.
Permit me to wish you the best of luck, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
Sure we shall meet again.
Oh, why did you let him go, Holmes?
Why not?
He's frightening Miss Henshaw.
But not molesting her, old chap. In fact, it might be a good thing if someone is keeping an eye on her. In the meanwhile, Watson, let's see if we can find a cab and get back to the Diogenes Club. I don't want to keep Claude waiting. Cora, has Claude Horton arrived yet?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. He and another gentleman came in about 5 minutes ago. They went up to the library. The other gentleman has just left.
I see. Thank you. This way, Watson. I'm sorry, Sir Claude, to have kept you waiting. We took a little longer, but... Sir Claude!
Great heavens, what's the matter with him?
Holmes, I found the answer. Too late. It's...
No, sir. Don't try and stand up. You're ill.
What are you trying to tell me?
The ruby. The ruby. Moriarty. The answer. The answer's in the book. In the book.
Sir Claude! Holmes! He's been stabbed. He's dead.
Just as he was trying to give me a message.
He was muttering something about the ruby and Moriarty. Twice he said, it's in the book.
Yes, there's a book still in his hand.
It's a copy of the Tales of Edgar Allan Poe.
His thumb's marking a page. The story of the purloined letter. Thank you, Sir Claude. You delivered your message. Come on, Watson. We want to catch a murderer and a thief. We must go back to the Savoy Theatre as quickly as we can.
Why do you suppose Sir Claude was murdered?
Because I was too curious. Been investigating the problem of the stolen ruby and had found out something. Something that he promised to tell me at supper, you remember? And so he was killed by a man who came with him to the club tonight. Fortunately, he gave me a clue by indicating Poe's story of the purloined letter.
But I still don't see how that helps you.
Well, it leads us to the ruby. The premise of Poe's story is that the most obvious hiding place is the safest. Now, what physical object was most prominent on the stage in tonight's play?
By Jove. A ruby.
Exactly. How better can you hide a stolen ruby than by exhibiting it night after night as a stolen ruby before the eyes of thousands?
Well, you mean you expect to find it in the property room backstage?
Precisely. That and a murderer. Wait for us, cabby. Come on, Watson. You have your revolver, old chap?
Yes, I do.
Well, keep it handy. Our visit may not be unexpected. Unlocked, that's good. Come on.
Look, Holmes, look. The doorkeeper. He's slumped over his desk.
Been given chloroform. We'll take the liberty of borrowing his lantern.
It's an eerie atmosphere about a dark and empty theater, isn't there, Holmes?
Now, where would the stage properties be kept, I wonder? Hold the lantern a little higher, will you, old fellow?
Yeah.
That's it. Ah, look over there.
A large cabinet. It's marked Property Department.
And it's unlocked. Oh, this is frighteningly easy. Let's look out for a trap. Now, let's see.
Look. There's a ruby lying on that tray.
Yes. Hold it up under the lantern, Watson. Exactly. It's as I thought. This is no paste stage property. It's a genuine ruby. In the light of this lantern, it's very hard. Down, Watson, quick!
He nearly got us. Smashed our lantern.
Yes, he's got an air rifle. A powerful one, too, confound it. There's no flash to indicate where he's firing from. Of course, he's baited his trap so neatly that he knows exactly where we are.
I'm going to take a shot at him. I can't see anything, but at least it'll let him know that we're armed.
Now, move your position quickly, Watson.
Just missed me, Holmes. This is hopeless shooting in the dark.
Yes. I've got to switch the stage lights on. Keep him occupied, old fellow, will you? While I try to find the light switches.
I've got him. But he can still shoot, confound it.
Yes, well, I found the light switch. Keep your eyes skinned, Watson. I'm turning it on.
There he is, Holmes. Up in that box.
Getting away. After him, Watson. We can jump over the footlights into the box. Ah! I'm afraid the bird has flown, Watson. I should have remembered the theater exit doors always open from the inside.
No, he didn't get away, Holmes. Look on the floor there. It's that Egyptian fella.
I hope you haven't wounded him too badly, old
I don't
chap.
care if I have. He was trying to kill us. No, it's only a shoulder wound. He's fainted, infernal scoundrel.
No, he's a very gallant man. Undoubtedly, he was trying to save us as you shot him just now.
Holmes, what on earth are you talking about? Obviously, he's Moriarty.
No, Watson. Moriarty just escaped through the door you heard clang a few moments ago.
And what's this man doing here?
As a fellow detective, undoubtedly he followed us. Perhaps he preceded us. When Moriarty started shooting, this man tried to capture him and got wounded by you for his pains.
Then who is Moriarty? He must be someone connected with this theater.
It's obvious. Moriarty is Moriarty.
What? You mean Frank Ferrers, the fellow that played the part on the stage?
Again, remember Poe's story of the purloined letter.
But why didn't you recognize him?
Oh, remember, I haven't seen him for 20 years, and you haven't forgotten his genius for disguise, have you?
What incredible audacity.
How better could Moriarty conceal himself than by announcing nightly to the theater-going public that he was Professor Moriarty?
And he killed Sir Claude.
Of course he did. Sir Claude must have persuaded Moriarty to go to the club with him. Probably he hoped to expose him in front of me, but Moriarty found out that Sir Claude knew too much. Yes. So he stabbed him. Rushed back here to bait his trap for us.
Yes. But how did he know that we'd walk into it?
Well, he knew that if Sir Claude had guessed his secret, then I certainly would, and so he was waiting for us.
Hello. He's coming too. How are you feeling, my man?
The ruby. The ruby. Did you find the ruby?
Yes. Here it is, sir. Tell me, is it the ruby of Muhammad Ali?
No. It is a fine stone, but it is not the one for which I have searched all my life. And so my endless quest must go on.
He's fainted again.
Poor devil. Fine mess I made of this case, Watson.
Oh, I don't know. You've recovered the ruby?
Yes, look at it, old fellow. Before I turn it over to Miss Henshaw, look at it well. Probably its every facet stands for a bloody deed.
It's a beautiful stone.
And yet this lovely bauble has cost Sir Claude his life.
And that devil Moriarty still goes free.
But one day, Watson, and may the day come soon, I shall meet Moriarty again. And when that happens and I finally bring him to justice, then and only then can you write fini to the character of Sherlock Holmes.
Well, Doctor, that was kind of an exciting story. Tell me, did the Egyptian recover from his bullet wound?
Yes, indeed he did, and rather quickly, too, Mr. Foreman. I felt very badly about shooting him, but of course I couldn't help it.
Of course not.
But, you know, if I had to shoot someone accidentally, I wish it could have been the actor who portrayed me on the stage. Wretched fellow mumbled all over the place.
Oh, don't worry about that. After all, you did recover the ruby.
Yes, and a beautiful stone it was. The color of, the color of a fine glass of port when the light shines through it.
By a fine port, I take it you're talking about a Petri port?
Is there any other kind?
Well, all kidding aside, Doctor, Petri port, like all Petri wines, is good wine. And I can tell you why very simply. Petri took time to bring you good wine. You see, the Petri family has been making wine for a good many generations, since way back in the 1800s. And because the Petri business has always been family-owned, everything the family has ever learned about the art of making wine, they've been able to hand down from father to son, from father to son. That adds up to a lot of skill and a lot of experience when it comes to turning plump, juice-filled California grapes into clear, fragrant, delicious wine. So when you want a wine for any occasion, obviously you can't go wrong with a Petri wine, because Petri took time to bring you good wine. And now, Dr. Watson, what story do you have lined up for us next week?
Now, let me see. Next week, Mr. Foreman, I'm going to tell you a most unusual adventure that occurred to Sherlock Holmes and me early in the last World War. It took place in Flanders and concerned a famous British general, an actress, and a German firing squad.
Boy, that sounds like a real thriller. Well, see you here next week.
No. Not here, Mr. Foreman, remember?
Oh, of course. Next week, we're going to be at the Paramount Theater in Hollywood for the 7th War Loan Drive.
That's quite right. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't invite you all to my home for one of our broadcasts, but we can get together next week at the Paramount Theater in Hollywood. You can get a free ticket for our broadcast by buying a war bond. And I sincerely hope that you will do this, so that we can see you next week at this time.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of the Second Stain. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station.
Oh, the Petri family took the time to bring you such good wine. So when you eat and when you cook, remember Petri wine.
To make good food taste better, remember...
Petri
Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petri family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. From the stage of the Paramount Theater in Hollywood, Petri Wine brings you... Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. You know something? If right now it were possible for me to ask every one of you what you had for dinner this evening, I'll bet a good many of you would say chicken. Chicken is an all-American favorite. But boy, you just haven't tasted chicken till you've tried it together with a glass of well-chilled Petri California Sauterne. Petri Sauterne is a perfect mealtime wine, just made to go with chicken. That Petri Sauterne is a white wine, delicate in color, and what a flavor. A flavor that comes right from the heart of luscious, sun-ripened grapes. You can just taste those wonderful grapes. And I'll tell you something. That Petri Sauterne is pretty much on the terrific side when served with fish or any kind of seafood, too. That's a fact. But say, whenever you serve that Petri Sauterne, remember you can serve it proudly, because the name Petri is the proudest name in the history of American wines. And now for our weekly doctor's appointment. Let's knock on his library door and see if...
There's no point in doing that, Mr. Slattery. I'm right behind you.
Oh, hello, Dr. Watson. Don't tell me you've been stalking me.
No, my boy, I was on the patio and I heard your footsteps, so I thought that I'd come in and fetch you. Let's go back and sit out there, shall we? It's a beautiful evening.
That's fine with me, Doctor.
Here we are. Now, settle yourself down in a chair and light a cigarette, if you have one. And I'll get on with my story.
Well, last week you told us it concerned an adventure that you and Sherlock Holmes had in Flanders during the First World War.
That's right, Mr. Slattery, did.
I thought that you and the great man had retired at that period.
We had, my boy, but it was only natural that as soon as the war broke out, we both offered our services in any capacity that might help our country.
Of course. And how did tonight's story begin, Doctor?
It was in the winter of that first year. Things weren't going very well for the Allies. The Germans were advancing on Paris, and the picture was looking very black. It was just 24 hours before the famous Battle of the Marne began, the battle that changed the early course of the war, when Holmes told me that we had to go up to the front lines on a secret mission. We'd been in Paris for several weeks, where Holmes had just solved the case of the missing aide-de-camp. I was anxious to get back to England and my work in the war hospitals, but of course this new summons was in the nature of a command. And so, late on a rainy September afternoon, Holmes and I, with the boom of gunfire in our ears, found ourselves in the front seat of a staff car, sloshing and jolting its way towards the battlefield.
Am I driving too fast for you, gentlemen?
No, Sergeant, not at all.
No, you're doing a splendid job. Oh, my man, look out considering the state of the road.
Thank you, sir.
Hello? The gunfire's getting nearer, Holmes.
Yes, old fellow. I imagine we haven't much further to go, have we, Sergeant?
No, sir, we're nearly there.
Did you notice the two civilians in the back seat, Holmes?
Yes. Handsome woman and a distinguished-looking man, several years her senior.
I wonder who they are.
I'll tell you. He's a Shakespearean actor of some note, though he never achieved the fame to which he thinks he's entitled. I shouldn't be at all surprised if he feels that he's been slighted in not receiving a knighthood.
But, Holmes, that's amazing. How can you possibly deduce all that from just looking at the man as we got into the car?
Elementary, my dear fellow, I didn't deduce it. We saw him twice last year in the London Theatre, if you remember. His name is Maitland Morris. As for his biography, he's a friend of my brother, Mycroft's. He told me about him.
Well, what do you suppose he's doing up here near the front line?
His brother is General Sir Stanley Morris, who's in command of this particular front, and it would seem reasonable to presume that his brother has come up here to give a performance for the frontline troops. I suppose this hut is as far as we can drive, Sergeant.
I'm afraid so, sir. We're 4 miles from the front line now. You'll have to clear your papers here. See that ruined farmhouse there, sir?
Yes, Sergeant. Is that the General's headquarters?
Yes, sir.
Come on, Watson.
Good Lord, it's pelting with rain.
Yeah, let's make a dash for it.
Oh, who goes there?
Friend,
Give the password.
St. Crispin.
Pass, friends, and show your papers.
How did you know the password, Holmes?
I was given it before we left Paris, old chap.
Oh, it's Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, isn't it?
Yes, Captain.
I'm Captain Maxwell, General Morris's aide-de-camp. He asked me to escort you up to his headquarters. By the way, weren't Maitland Morris and his wife in the car with you?
Yes, they're just behind us.
Oh, splendid. I'm afraid I'll have to ask to see your papers.
Yes, of course. Here's my permit, Captain Maxwell.
Thank you. I know you both, of course, but we can't afford to take any chances when they're this close to the enemy lines. Let's see. Oh, yes, that's fine, Doctor. Everything's in order. Yours, please, Mr. Holmes.
Here you are.
Thanks.
Oh, who goes there? Friend.
There's the rescue party now.
Oh, good. This is quite in order, Mr. Holmes.
Show your papers.
Oh, there you are, Captain Maxwell.
Oh, hello, sir. Hello, Mrs. Morris.
How are you, Captain Maxwell?
Well, you've both met Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, I suppose?
Well, no, we haven't, even though we drove up in the same car. Natural reserve of us Britishers, I suppose. How are you, Mr. Holmes?
How do you do, sir?
I know your brother Mycroft very well. How are you, Doctor?
I'm glad to meet you, Mr. Morris. I saw you a couple of times in the theatre last year and enjoyed your performances very much.
Oh, thank you, sir. Well, then you must know my wife, my leading lady.
How do you do, gentlemen?
How do you do, Mr. Morris?
Can I see your papers, Mr. Morris? Just a matter of form. You understand.
Yes, of course.
Mrs. Morris, I presume you and your husband are going to give a performance tonight for the men going up the front line.
Yes, Doctor. We're very flattered. They've asked us to do some Shakespearean scenes.
Oh, yes.
Although I should have thought something a little lighter would have been more appropriate. The General, he's Maitland's brother, you know, seemed to think differently.
Well, my dear, show Captain Maxwell your papers. Then we can all go along and see my brother Stanley.
Very well, Maitland.
Mr. Morris, I shall look forward to hearing your reading of Shakespeare's St. Crispin speech from Henry V tonight.
Well, bless my soul, Holmes. How did you know I was planning to do it?
Well, the setting is so perfect and the time so appropriate, I can't conceive an English actor who could resist the temptation.
Oh, right.
I noticed that your brother appreciated the fact in naming today's password.
Yes, it's amazingly appropriate. You know, it's almost 500 years ago to the day that the Battle of Agincourt took place.
Well, let's hope that the results of the forthcoming battle will be equally successful for England.
Yes, indeed. Oh, by the way, Holmes, this will probably seem rather silly to you, but I'm an inveterate autograph collector, and I have my book here with me. I wonder if you'd mind signing.
I should be very glad to, Mr. Morris. Give me a pen, will you, Watson?
Holmes.
You'll find yourself among quite distinguished company in that book, sir.
So I see. Adelina Patti, Crown Prince of Norway. Hello. Field Marshal von Tauchnitz.
Oh, yes. He was one of my admirers when I played in Munich before the war. I suppose now that our countries are fighting, I should tear that page out. Do you know, I cannot help but feel that art and the appreciation of art are independent of national hatred.
Quite so, sir. I myself still have a medal presented to me by the University of Leipzig for some trifling services. There you are, Mr. Morris.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Holmes. A notable addition to my collection.
I shall be very glad to sign your book for you, Mr. Morris, if you'd like me to.
That's very kind of you, Doctor. Oh, Captain Maxwell, if our permits are all in order, don't you think we should be moving along?
Just what I was going to suggest myself. I'll take you all straight over to General Morris's headquarters.
May I introduce Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson?
How do you do, sir?
How are you, General?
How do you do? Know a lot about you. Long way from Baker Street, isn't it?
Yes, indeed, sir.
Where's that brother of mine? Ah, there you are, Maitland. Cynthia, how nice to see you both.
Oh, it's good to see you again, Stanley.
Hello there, Stanley. The men will be glad you arrived. They're looking forward to your show tonight.
We're very flattered that they want to hear us do some Shakespeare.
Oh, rubbish, old boy. With you and Cynthia up there on the platform, you could read the telephone book and they'd love you.
Oh, very kind.
By the way, you'll find the stage very primitive, just a few trestles and a large tent and a curtain made of army blankets. And your dressing room will be even worse.
Oh, don't worry about our comfort, Stanley. As long as we cheer the boys up, that's the important thing.
Yes, of course. By the way, what program do you have mapped out for us?
Well, I thought we'd have two shows. The tent's not large enough to hold everybody at once. Anyway, we have to keep up an alert all the time. Think you can manage two separate shows?
Oh, of course I can, Stanley. I may look old, but I don't feel it.
You don't even look it, you scoundrel.
Thank you. Perhaps we could take a look at the stage and equipment, eh?
Oh, certainly. Captain Maxwell, take them over to the tent and show them what the facilities are, will you?
Right, sir. Will you follow me?
Oh, yes, of course. See you later, Stanley. Come along, my dear.
All right.
I'm glad you're here, Holmes. I'm sure I can speak quite freely in front of Dr. Watson.
Oh, yes, with perfect freedom, sir. He's my colleague, and he's an old army man himself.
Really? What regiment, Doctor?
The 5th Northumberland Fusiliers, sir. Later attached to the Berkshires in Afghanistan and wounded in the Battle of Mainwan.
Really? Then I'm sure I can speak freely in front of you. Holmes, you know why you're up here so near the front line, don't you?
I have a very shrewd suspicion, sir.
Yeah, I thought you had. That's why I asked for you to be sent here.
You asked for me to be sent here, General. Yes, I think I understand.
Well, I wish I did.
You will, Doctor, in due time. In the meanwhile, gentlemen, I'll have an orderly show you to your quarters.
Thank you, sir.
And, Holmes, take a look around, will you, and keep your ears open. We're comparatively a little distance from the German front lines, and yet there's a very puzzling silence just now.
Yes, I noticed that, sir. And half an hour ago, on our way up, there's quite a lot of shelling.
Exactly. It's unnatural and rather frightening at a time like this. You see, we're attacking at dawn. The enemy might be trying to infiltrate spies, and the whole success of this battle depends on a surprise attack.
I quite understand, sir. Come on, Watson.
Holmes. The first performance starts in a few minutes, you know. They're all there waiting. Why are we tramping about out here in the mud and the rain?
I thought a pipe or two in the open air would clear our brains.
Yes, a pipe in the open air is one thing, but a pipe in a downpour of rain's another.
Was it raining? Oh, didn't even notice it. I was listening to the silence.
What do you mean?
Thousands upon thousands of Germans. Armed Germans. Full of a blind fanatical hatred and desire to kill. Are crouched in trenches only a mile or two from here. Surrounding us are an equal number of English boys, also armed. And with a will, if not the desire, to fight. Because they know their cause is the cause of freedom and justice. All these thousands poised, ready to pounce on each other and fight to the death. And yet, beyond that patter of rain, there isn't a sound to break the stillness of a September evening. Huh. Strange world we live in, old chap.
You're being unusually rhetorical, Holmes.
Yes, I am, aren't I? Let's be a little more practical, shall we? I wonder what is wrong with the actors tonight.
Oh, why do you ask that?
Well, a little while ago, I noticed Mrs. Morris in a great state of excitement, going towards the farmhouse where the General is. Then she went back to her own quarters, and now she seems to be headed in our direction. Is anything wrong, Mrs. Morris?
It's Maitland.
What's wrong with him, madam?
He's disappeared.
Disappeared? What's happened?
We were in the tent together, making up for our performance, when an orderly came in with a message. Maitland said it was from his brother. Slipped on a raincoat and went out, saying he'd be back in a few moments. I waited and waited, and after a while I got worried, and I went over to see the General myself. He said that he'd sent no message, and that he hadn't seen any sign of Maitland.
Good Lord, what could have happened to him?
I don't know, Doctor, but I'm frightened. What shall I do, Mr. Holmes?
You're a brave woman, Mrs. Morris.
Brave? I don't know, Mr. Holmes. Why?
Because the show must go on. I shall take your husband's place.
But Holmes, something's happened to Maitland. He's in danger. He might
True,
be...
Watson, true.
Huh?
But 1,000 men inside that tent are in mortal danger, too. Tomorrow morning, many of them may be corpses on the fields of Flanders. But tonight, They've been promised a show.
Do you think that you can do it, Holmes?
Oh, I think I can with the help of Mrs. Morris.
I can't do it, Mr. Holmes.
You can, Mrs. Morris, and you will. If only to uphold that great tradition of the theater that the show must go on.
We'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a few seconds. Time I'd like to take to tell you that if you've got a butcher who has meat and you've got the points to get that meat, don't forget to bring home a bottle of Petri California Burgundy. Tell you why. That Petri Burgundy is a rich red mealtime wine that's wonderful with any meat or meat dish. That's a fact. Petri Burgundy can make a banquet out of a hamburger. And boy, Petri Burgundy and old-fashioned Irish stew are bosom companions. Just get yourself some Petri Burgundy and share it with your family. Petri Burgundy is the best friend a good meal ever had. And now, back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. It is just before the Battle of the Marne in the First World War, and Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are at headquarters a few miles behind the front-line trenches. A famous Shakespearean actor who was to give a performance for the troops has mysteriously disappeared, and the great detective has taken his place at the last minute. As we rejoin our story, Sherlock Holmes, alone on the improvised stage, is delivering a Shakespearean speech before a spellbound audience.
Happy breed of men. This little world, this precious stone set in a silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall or as a moat defensive to a house against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England.
Holmes, that shot, are you all right?
Yes, old chap. Fortunately, I started to leave the stage as the shot was fired. The bullet just missed me. I heard it splinter some wood nearby.
But who on earth would want to shoot you?
That's what we've got to find out, though I think it more likely that the shot was intended for me. It was not intended for me, but for Maitland Morris, the man for whom I'm substituting.
Well, even so, who'd want to shoot him?
Oh, don't ask me so many questions, old fellow. Let's see what clues we can find. Now, the shot was fired from outside the tent from behind me. Yes, look there. See the hole in the tent there?
By Jove, yes. The footlights would outline your shadow on the back of the tent. Whoever it must have fired at your silhouette.
The question is, where did the bullet embed itself? Aha. Look here, Watson. You got a penknife?
Wait a minute. Here, Holmes.
This shouldn't be hard to extract. Look at this splintered tent pole. Wait a minute. There we are. Excellent. Huh. Very interesting.
Oh, what's so interesting about it? Just a revolver bullet, isn't it?
No, it isn't, Watson.
Huh?
It's far from just a revolver bullet. This bullet was fired from a German Luger pistol.
A German pistol? There must have been a spy here behind our lines.
That's a reasonable enough assumption. Yes, we may be sure that no English soldier would carry such a weapon and face inspection. Come on, I want to talk to Mrs. Morris. Mrs. Morris, I want you to be very frank with me.
But of course, Mr. Holmes.
You know why your husband's missing, don't you?
No, I don't. Have you found out anything?
Come, madam. Why keep up this pretense any longer? I know that your husband is a spy, or at least a great sympathizer with the German cause.
The general's brother a spy? Good Lord.
How dare you say that?
Because it's true. Foreign Office have been suspicious of his sympathies for some time. His own brother knew it. That's why he asked to have me sent up here to keep an eye on him during his visit.
It is true. Why should I keep up the pretense any longer? You see, Maitland was a disciple of Stuart Houston Chamberlain.
Oh, who was this Stuart Houston Chamberlain?
An Englishman who married one of Richard Wagner's daughters and became a German citizen, and an arch-enemy of England.
I tried to dissuade Maitland. I implored him to consider his British heritage, his brother's name and mine. But Maitland was a strange man. His life was one of frustration and envy.
Envy of his brother, I suppose?
Yes. When Stanley was knighted, it hurt Maitland terribly. He said it was typical that the English would knight a soldier and yet leave a great artist like himself unrecognized. That in Berlin, they really understood and rewarded the artist.
Well, if the authorities knew that, it's amazing they allowed him to come so close to the front lines at a time like this.
Oh, it was at the general's request. He wanted to plead with my husband to warn him that his secret was known. And now Maitland's gone over to the German lines. Oh, it's terrible.
It's worse than that. It's disastrous. He can give them information as to the strength of our troops here. He knows the password. He might even know the hour the attack is timed to start.
How did your husband expect to enter the German lines in safety, Mrs. Morris?
He speaks fluent German, Mr. Holmes. I fancy the autograph book he was carrying containing the signature of Field Marshal von Tauchnitz, but in reality he's passed through the German lines.
You've told the general that his brother was gone, of course.
I haven't been able to. He moved up to the front line position immediately after the first performance, though I had warned him what I thought Maitland was planning to do. I think he intended to give his performance first, then cross the lines immediately afterwards. But something must have made him change his mind. Perhaps he suspected I'd warned the general. Anyhow, as you know, when I got back to our quarters, he'd gone.
Did he leave any note, madam?
Yes, he did. Here it is.
Thank you. I have gone, my dear. Try and understand and forgive if you can. You wouldn't come with me, and so I'm taking what is left of my heart, my hopes, where they belong, among the friends that understand and appreciate me. It is something stronger than love and blood and country that makes me do this. It is something dearer to me than life itself. Dearer to me than life itself.
Oh, how could he? How could he? The shame of this will kill poor Stanley. Mr. Holmes, will you break the news to him? I know it's cowardly of me, but I just can't tell him myself.
Don't worry, Mrs. Morris. I'll tell him. Dr. Watson and I will ask Captain Maxwell to escort us to the General's frontline headquarters. In the meantime, try and keep calm. We'll tell him.
If you will wait in the dugout, Mr. Holmes, I'll tell the General that you're here.
Thank you, and be sure to let him know the urgency of the matter.
Yes, sir.
Holmes, this is a dreadful business.
Yes, it is, Watson. Though if my plans work out correctly, I think the success of tomorrow's battle may not be imperiled.
What plan?
Listen.
You know, Holmes, a strange silence from the German line since we came here might be accounted for by the fact that they knew Maitland was making his getaway. They wouldn't want to risk wounding such a valuable spy.
Quite possibly.
What I still don't understand is who shot at you with a German pistol and why.
You're being very dense, old fellow. Surely it's obvious that... Here comes General Morris now.
Poor devil. This is going to be a dreadful shock to him.
Hello, Holmes. Dr. Watson?
General Morris, I'm afraid that I've bad news for you. Your brother has gone over to the German lines.
Maitland did go there. I should have put him under an armed guard as soon as he came here, but I thought I could reason with him, appeal to his sense of honor.
Instead of which you tried to shoot him, sir, but fortunately for me, you missed. You see, I took his place at the first performance.
But that shot was fired from a German pistol.
True. That was when I first knew the general had fired the shot.
But I still don't see how you could now.
Only a high-ranking officer, not subject to inspection, could carry a non-regulation firearm. You're an old army man, you should know that. In any case, you'll observe that the general carries a Luger at his waist.
Great heavens, Holmes. I thought I was firing at Maitland. I had no idea that it was you.
You intended to kill your own brother, sir?
Yes. And I'm sorry I failed. I'd rather see my brother dead than alive and a traitor to his country. But now he's safely in the German lines. Heaven knows what secrets he may be imparting. One thing we can be certain. Our chance of a surprise attack in the morning is gone.
Possibly not, sir.
Oh, what do you mean, Holmes?
You see, I took the liberty of altering your brother's credentials quite extensively.
How, Holmes?
I knew of his German sympathies. Mycroft had given me a great deal of information about him, and so I took it on myself to decide that it was unsafe to allow him so near the enemy lines with his own identification on him.
Well, what did you do, Holmes?
I took the liberty, sir, of stealing his autograph book, the one containing the magical signature of Field Marshal von Tauchnitz. I have it in my pocket now. I think we shall find within its pages a code concealed in the various autographs, giving valuable information to the enemy.
Good Lord.
I also switched military permits on him. I felt that in the event that he did go over to the German lines, his welcome might be less cordial if they were under the impression that they'd captured Sherlock Holmes. To make that identification doubly sure, I also slipped in his pocket a slight souvenir of my own.
By Joe, Holmes, you mean that medal that was presented to you by the University of Leipzig?
Exactly, old fellow. I no longer wish to own a decoration given me by a country of barbarians, and it seemed a rather neat and effective way of returning it to them.
So the Germans will think they've captured Sherlock Holmes?
Yes, sir, and unless I'm much mistaken, he'll receive very short shrift at their hands.
Yes, they hate you.
There's your answer, sir. I'm sorry.
Well, don't be sorry, Holmes. It's better that way. Now his secret can die with him.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Maxwell, what is it?
Would it be in order for me to return to headquarters now, sir? It's very nearly time for the second performance, and I've still been unable to trace the whereabouts of your brother.
Well, my brother will not be acting tonight, I'm afraid. Holmes, I wonder if I might ask you to take his place once again.
If you want me to, General.
I do. Maitland had planned to do the St. Crispin speech from Henry V. He knew how much I loved it.
I realize that, sir. When I was told the password up here.
Well, can you remember the speech, Holmes?
Oh, I think so. At any rate, I can try.
Then do it for me, my dear fellow, will you? For me.
I'll be very proud to do it, General. Goodbye and good luck.
Thank you, Holmes. Captain Maxwell, take them back to headquarters, will you? The men will be waiting for the performance.
Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispian's Day.
Well, Doctor, that was a bit of an exciting adventure you told.
No, I can still remember that awful feeling I had when I heard the shot in the tent and realized someone had tried to kill Holmes.
He did have a narrow escape, didn't he?
Well, Holmes always said there was no such thing as a narrow escape. He said you either escaped or you didn't. If you did, well, why worry? And if you didn't, you couldn't worry. So what?
Quite a philosophy. I'd like to discuss it with you further.
Over a bottle of wine?
How else?
What kind of wine?
Naturally.
Naturally.
You couldn't ask for a more delicious wine than Petri. That's because the Petri family knows how to make good wine. They ought to. They've been making fine wine ever since they started the Petri business way back in the 1800s. And because the business has always been family-owned and operated, well, they've been able to hand on from father to son, all they've ever learned about the art of turning luscious grapes into fragrant, delicious wine. That's why no matter what type Petri wine you buy for any occasion, you can be sure it's good wine because Petri took time to bring you good wine. And now, Dr. Watson, how's about giving us a clue to next week's Sherlock Holmes adventure?
Next week, Mr. Clatter, I'm going to tell you a most unusual adventure in which Holmes and I are trapped in an airtight metal chamber, our only companion being a murdered scientist.
Well, sounds like a story we don't want to miss, Doctor. See you next week.
Yes. Oh, just a second, Mr. Clatter. Before we go, I just want to tell our listeners that tonight we're broadcasting from the stage of the Paramount Theater here in Hollywood on behalf of the 7th War Loan Drive. The ticket of admission to the theater was a war bond. I'm mentioning this to remind you, our friends, that you have an important part to play in making the 7th War Loan a success. Buy more and buy bigger bonds than ever before. They're needed to pay for new super forts, new jet-propelled fighters, newer and bigger weapons to lick Japan. Remember, in spite of the magnificent achievements of our forces in the Pacific, the Japanese war has just begun. So let's go all out for the mighty 7th War Loan.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventures of the Blanched Soldier. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station.
Oh, the Petri family took the time to bring you such good wine. So when you eat and when you cook, remember Petri wine.
To make good food taste better, remember...
Petri wine.
This is Jack Slattery saying good night for the Petri family. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petrie family, the family that took time to bring you good wine. I invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. Of course, I can't be as entertaining as Dr. Watson, but I can tell you something that's really worth knowing. Simply this. The best beginning a good meal ever had is a glass of Petrie California sherry. Petrie sherry is the perfect before-dinner wine. While you're waiting for dinner to be put on the table, pour yourself a glass of that clear, amber-colored Petrie sherry. Now, just sit back and sip it slowly. Take your time so you can thoroughly enjoy every single drop of that wonderful Petrie flavor. And what a flavor that sherry has. Comes right from the sun-ripened heart of wonderful California grapes. Now, you may be a real wine expert and know all about sherry wine, but believe me, until you've tried a Petrie sherry, you're really missing something, and no kidding. Serve Petrie sherry alone, or serve it with canopies or appetizers. And by all means, serve it proudly. You can because the letters P-E-T-R-I spell the proudest name in the history of American wines. Petrie. And now for our weekly visit with the good Dr. Watson. Let's see if he's expecting us.
Come in.
Ah, good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Campbell. It's about time you got here. Draw up a chair and make yourself comfortable.
Oh, thanks. Well, you have the old black dispatch box out again, I see. I suppose you've been going over your notes on tonight's adventure.
That's right, my boy. And this may interest you. Mrs. Watson figured prominently in the story.
She did?
Yes, in fact, if it hadn't been for some remarkably quick thinking on her part, Holmes and I might have... well, there I go again, telling you the end of the story before I began it.
Well, how did it begin, Doctor?
On a winter evening in 1887. I'd been married some months, and in consequence, I hadn't seen much of my old friend Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, you're still living at Baker Street, I suppose?
Yes, my boy, but we couldn't persuade him to come round and see us. From time to time, I'd heard some vague accounts of his doings, of his summons to Odessa in the case of the Trepoff murder, and of his clearing up the singular tragedy of the Atkinson brothers. But to get back to tonight's story, my wife and I had just finished an excellent dinner. I remember had settled ourselves down for an evening of pleasant domesticity. She was stitching away on a piece of exquisite petit pois, and I was at my desk balancing figures in the family account book. After a few moments, my wife looked up to me and said,
John, dear, don't look so troubled.
"Oh, was I looking troubled?"
Well, you've been scowling at that account book for 10 minutes now. What's the matter, dear? Don't the figures add up correctly?
Oh, yes, they add up correctly. In fact, they tell a very pretty story. After buying my practice and setting up all my outstanding accounts, I find that we have nearly £150 left of the diary that Mr. Sholto has settled upon you.
160, isn't it, dear? I was doing the same sum this morning.
Oh, well, but it is 160. In any case, Mary, dear, the point I was going to make is that we don't need the money just now. My practice is picking up splendidly, and I was thinking that we might invest it in something really sound, of course.
Who's been talking to you, John? Dr. Wilson again.
Well, as it happens, I did bump into him at the hospital today. He can put us onto something very good in Peruvian silver. What do you think of the idea?
Well, John, the fact is, I'd almost decided to make a business investment with it myself. I thought I'd surprise you.
Well,
now let me tell you about it, John.
Oh.
Yesterday, when you were out on your rounds,
Yes?
a most charming man called here, a Mr. Ted Barber. He introduced himself as a friend of Mrs. Cecil Forrester's. He said he was certain we'd be interested in his new company. And he talked so convincingly that, well, I'm afraid I almost promised him I'd buy some stock in the company.
Really? What sort of company is it?
Well, I didn't quite understand that part of it, but it sounded wonderful. He left a prospectus. It's in the right-hand drawer of the desk. It's something to do with a wonderful new metal that's been discovered by an American chemist called Paradil or Paradies or something.
Oh, let's have a look and see what it says. A company formed to exploit the amazing new metal discovered by Dr. Paradies. Paradol preferred stock. The potentialities of this new alloy are immeasurable. The fourth dimension has been conquered. What? Vital dislocation is an accomplished fact. Oh, gracious me, my dear child. This prospectus is absolute poppycock.
Now, John, you mustn't be stubborn. I think at least we should investigate it. The man said that if we went to the laboratories, Dr. Paradis would give us a demonstration himself.
But Mary dear, the fourth dimension. I mean to say, it's obviously a fraud.
That's what everyone says when a new invention comes out. This might be an opportunity for us to make a lot of money, John.
Mary, I do wish
to please me, dear.
Well, I can't argue with you very long, Mary. All right. I'll take you to the laboratory in the morning, but I warn you, I'll show this Dr. Paradis up for the charlatan that he is.
Dr. Paradis will be with you both in a moment.
Thank you, my man.
She's just concluding an experiment.
She?
Dr. Paradis is a woman, then?
Oh, yes, madam, and a very brilliant one, too. Excuse me.
Oh, it's a last straw. The whole thing sounded like an obvious fraud, and now we get here and find that a woman doctor's at the back of it all.
Just because she's a woman, it doesn't mean to say that...
How do you do? I'm Dr. Paradis.
Oh, how do you do, madam? I'm Dr. Watson, and this is my wife, Mrs. Watson.
Oh, yes. Come into the laboratory, won't you?
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Paradis.
Well, we're just wasting your time. We're not really interested in this at all, you know.
John, don't mutter.
Mr. Barber told me that he had called on you, Mrs. Watson, and that you were very interested in my invention.
Oh, yes, I am. That's why I persuaded my husband to come down with me and see a demonstration.
I'll be most happy to show you everything I can. Here's a practical example of the application of my work. This chamber you see in front of you is made completely of my new alloy.
Oh, what's the thing do? It's just a great metal box. A lot of dials and switches and things. Why is it so big? Do people get inside it?
They can.
What?
Though if they do, they're liable to find themselves transported many miles from here. Come inside, won't you?
Oh, what a lot of nonsense.
Now, John.
I'll give you a demonstration. I want you both to see that there is no exit from inside this chamber. No trapdoors or anything. The only exit is the door we just came through.
Yes, it's just like an airtight metal room.
Stuffy in here, isn't it?
Now let's go outside again. I'll show you how the machine operates. Albert!
Yes, Dr. Paradis.
I'm going to demonstrate the Paradol chamber to Dr. and Mrs. Watson.
Oh, very well. The usual time?
Yes, please, Albert. Now, my assistant goes inside the chamber. I close this metal door on him, so.
What are you going to do with him?
Within a matter of seconds, he will be 7 miles from here.
Really, madam, you
Please,
can't
Dr.
expect
Watson,
us to believe.
you're a scientific man. At least give me the opportunity of demonstrating my work.
I'm sorry.
Now, I adjust these dials, turn on the electrical generator, and...
Good Lord, what an amazing business.
Now open the door, Dr. Watson, and look inside, please.
Great Scott, he's gone. I don't believe it. Dr. Paradis, will you explain this to me?
Gladly. My metal Paradol is an unnatural alloy.
What?
It causes a dislocation in the warp of space and enables us to enter the fourth dimension. You see, time is a dimension. Any object in the past, present, or future can be described precisely in 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time.
Yes, but this machine of yours...
The alloy of Paradol, combined with the great forces of electricity, has created a new force. This element is controlled by these dials, and it is possible to move in 4 dimensions at once. Thus, bodies or other objects can be transported great distances away, all in the twinkling of an eye. I've coined a word to describe the process. Teleportation, I call it.
Teleportation? Well, I'm completely confused. All my scientific training tells me this is impossible, and yet, I wonder if you'd give us another demonstration.
Certainly. Perhaps you yourself would like to be teleported somewhere.
Certainly not. Good gracious, we know.
No, I think John would be very unhappy in the 4th dimension. He wouldn't belong.
Yes, you said that any objects could be moved. How about that brown paper parcel on the table over there?
Certainly. It only contains some company circulars. I suggest you write your initials on it so that you can identify it later.
Oh, very well. J.H.W. There you are.
Where do you want it dispatched to?
Send it to my house. I'll give you the address.
That won't be necessary.
Mary, this is an amazing business.
Isn't it, John? Exciting, too.
There you are. Now I adjust the dials once more and... Parcel is already at your house.
Oh, it's impossible. Come on, Mary. Let's get a cab and race back there as fast as we can. Well,
Yes,
goodbye,
dear.
Doctor.
Goodbye, Doctor.
Bye.
Now, dear, John, you must admit you're just as excited as I am.
Well, I confess that I'm enormously intrigued. Let me just get my latch front door key. Here we are. Dr. Paradis is a devilishly clever woman. Even so, my intelligence tells me it's impossible for the package to have reached here before us. Ah, here we are.
Ah, there you are, Master. Mum, just in time for lunch.
Tell me, Annie, did a package arrive for us?
Oh, yes, it did, Mum. I put it on the old table.
Great Scott. How was it delivered, Annie?
Well, now, that's the funny thing about it, sir. I don't know. I went out to polish the brass on the door knocker a few minutes ago, and there was the parcel, lying on the doorstep. No one had rung the bell or anything. I didn't know how it got there.
Thank you, Annie. You can go now.
Yes, Mum.
Well, John, what do you say now?
That a miracle's been performed. I don't believe my eyes. Look, there are my initials on the package. Mary, I think that if you don't mind, after lunch
You'll go round to Baker Street and tell Sherlock Holmes about this.
You mind, dear?
Of course not, dear.
Good. It'll be nice to see Holmes again anyway.
Dr. Watson, how nice to see you again.
Hello, Mrs. Hudson. How are you, my dear?
Oh, I'm just fine. Oh, you're looking grand, sir. Marriage agrees with you, if you don't mind my saying so.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Hudson. Is Mr. Holmes in?
Aye, sir. And I'm very glad you're seeing him. He's no been acting like himself lately.
Oh, really?
Locking his door and only unlocking it for me when I give him a password. And he's hardly touched his food for the last 3 days. To tell you the truth, Dr. Watson, I'm awful worried about him.
Really? Well, I'll go up to him.
He'll be glad to see you, I'm sure.
Yes? Who is it?
It's me, Watson.
Watson? Oh, possibly. I'm not taking any chances.
Holmes, this is ridiculous. Surely you know my voice after all these years?
John H. Watson. Tell me what your middle initial stands for, and I'll let you in.
It stands for Hamish.
Watson, my dear fellow. How are you?
I'm fine and delighted to see you again, Holmes. Incidentally, why all this rigmarole about locked doors and passwords?
Well, Professor Moriarty has decided that it's high time to settle his score with me. There have been several attempts on my life lately. Twice I've been attacked in the streets, and only yesterday a shot was fired at me through the window you see broken there.
Lord Holmes, you must be careful.
I am being very careful. That's why I indulged in what you refer to as all this rigmarole. But, well, enough of my problems. What's on your mind? There's a sparkle in your eye and an air of excitement that tells me that you've some news to impart.
Well, I must say there is something.
Of course there is, my dear fellow. Come on, tell me about it.
You ever hear of a new metal called Paradol and its inventor, Dr. Paradis?
Oh, yes, indeed I have. I received a prospectus concerning it the other day.
Well, what do you think of the idea?
Oh, obviously it's rubbish designed to fool a gullible public into buying shares. Don't tell me that you were taking advice.
Oh, no, of course not, Holmes. Naturally, as a scientific man, I knew it was rubbish. My wife, however, had come a little involved in the concern, and so today, to prove to her that the whole thing was a fraud, we went down to the laboratory and met this Dr. Paradis.
Oh, did you indeed?
In the first place, let me tell you, this Dr. Paradis is a woman.
Oh, a woman?
As you can imagine, I didn't have any difficulty in discrediting her theories. In fact, I'm afraid I made her seem rather stupid. However, we did stay there long enough for her to give us a demonstration. And that's the way that it was, Holmes. When we got back to our house, the initial package was there, waiting for us.
Childish trick. Obviously, the Paradol chamber contains an ingeniously hidden trap door, through which the assistant disappeared and later the package. A fast cab then took it to your home before you could get there.
Oh, yes, so really? Well, yes, of course, that's exactly how I explained the thing to Mary.
Was she pressed with the feet?
Yes, she was. But you know how women are. I tried to tell her the whole thing was a fraud. She's very obstinate. I was hoping perhaps that you will help me expose the concern.
Oh, hardly seem necessary, old fellow. Such an obvious fraud. However, for your sake, I'll be glad to do anything I can.
Well, I thought we might go down to the laboratory late tonight when nobody's there and take a look at that Paradol chamber a little more closely.
Yes, rather a good idea. After being cooped up here for 3 days, it'll be a pleasure to get some night air and indulge in a little simple burglarizing.
Well, shall I call for you here?
No, wait a minute, dear fellow. It's much too dangerous. I'll be in a hansom cab outside your house about 11:30 tonight. How's that?
Splendid. Quite like old times, isn't it, Holmes?
Yes, 'tis, old chap, though I think that this time, for Mrs. Watson's sake, I must try and keep you out of trouble.
Midnight, Holmes.
Yes, Watson. Time that only confirmed old bachelors like myself should be wandering the streets of London.
Oh, rubbish, Holmes. You talk as if Mary was a tyrant.
Now, don't get angry with me, old chap. I was only being facetious. Is this, Dr. Parady's laboratory?
Yes. Like to be seen. I don't imagine it'll be very hard to break in, though.
Strike a match, will you? I took the precaution of bringing this lantern.
There you are.
Thanks, old fellow.
Is the door locked?
Yes, but I think the skeleton key will do the trick. Hold this lantern for a second, will you?
Yeah.
Oh, this is child's play so far. Come on.
Yes. There's the Paradol chamber over there.
Uh-huh. Give me the lantern again, old chap, will you? Thanks. Mm-hmm. Quite an elaborate contraption.
Door's been left open. Let's go in and take a look at the inside of it.
Not both of us, Watson. If this is the only entrance, and the two of us walked in, it'd be too easy to slam the door shut on us.
I suppose so. You go in and I'll keep watch out here.
All right. Oh, I trust that in a few minutes I won't find myself lying on your doorstep.
Holmes, there are times when your sense of humor is a little strained. Holmes, you all right? Watson, what is it, Holmes?
The body of a dead woman. She's been shot. Unless I'm much mistaken.
Let me come and look. 1,000 to 1, it's Dr. Parady's. Yes, it is.
Watson, get out of here. Don't you see the...
Good Lord, someone has slammed the door shut on us.
Yes, my dear fellow. We walked into a trap very neatly. I'm afraid that we're imprisoned in what appears to be an airtight metal chamber, and the only person who can help us to get out of it again is a corpse.
Dr. Watson's story will continue in just a few seconds. It's time for me to remind you that good food always tastes better when served together with good wine. Did you know that Petri makes 2 wonderful mealtime wines? Wines especially made to go with food? Well, they do. Petri California Burgundy and Petri California Sauterne. You want a rich, hearty red wine, a wine that's great with any meat or meat dish, you just try a Petri Burgundy. And if you want a wine that's perfect with chicken or fish, try a delicate golden-colored Petri Sauterne. Petri Burgundy if you want a red wine, Petri Sauterne if you want white. But always a Petri wine if you want a good wine. Now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. It is in the early hours of a winter's morning in 1887. The famous pair, while investigating the mysteries of a scientific laboratory in the East End of London, have been trapped in an airtight metal cabinet, their only companion being the dead body of a woman scientist. As we rejoin our story, Sherlock Holmes and his old friend Dr. Watson are listening intently as footsteps approach what appears to be their metal coffin.
There's someone outside. They're sliding back the metal panel.
Good evening, gentlemen.
That voice, it's Dr. Parady's assistant. Let us out of here.
Or should I be more precise, Mr. Holmes, and say good morning?
Hello, Moriarty.
Moriarty, you scoundrel. I can just get my hands on him.
Dr. Watson, I wish you could get over your dislike for me. For my own part, I'm genuinely sorry that my trap had to catch you, too. I've often felt unhappy that you're not on my side. That slavish admiration of you given your friend Sherlock Holmes must be highly gratifying.
There's never mind about all that. What do you think you're up to?
It's obvious, my dear Watson. The whole scheme was a plan to lure me out of my safe hiding by presenting an intriguing problem, and one that victimized the wife of my old friend. You knew it would get back to my ears, didn't you, Moriarty?
Yes, exactly.
But why did you murder this Parady's woman?
That's equally obvious, my dear Watson. It served her purpose in presenting a most convincing scientific front. As soon as the trap was baited, she was a liability. She might tell tales, and so she was killed. Like so many other of your accomplices, my dear Professor.
Precisely. Now, my dear fellows, I'm afraid that I must close this panel and say goodbye. Quite sorry to have to kill you, but you're becoming dreadfully in my way.
And how do you plan to kill us, Moriarty?
By doing nothing more than closing this cannon. I could be frightfully dramatic and release deadly gases into the chamber, or poisonous snakes, or something equally colorful. But quite frankly, it seems so much simpler just to shut you in. Our oxygen supply won't last very long, you know. And for your benefit, Dr. Watson, I may tell you that Paradol, whatever its other shortcomings as a metal, is bulletproof. Goodbye, you meddling fool!
There seems nothing for us to do but look around and ascertain our chances of escape.
Holmes, I don't like this. We're in a very nasty situation.
My dear Watson, sometimes you're a master of understatement. Aha, just as I thought.
What have you found, Holmes?
Sliding panel, just behind the dead woman. It leads us to a passageway. A passageway that has been bricked up only within the last few hours. But long enough, I'm afraid, to make it impossible. No, there's no escape here. Hold the lantern a little higher, will you, Walter?
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, what are we going to do now?
I was just estimating the cubic capacity of this chamber. Yes, supply should last comfortably for at least another 8 hours. I recommend a brief sleep to refresh us and also to conserve our oxygen supply.
Sleep? Who could sleep at a time like this?
I can and you can, old chap, if you discipline yourself.
Well, I'll try, Holmes, but I know perfectly well I shan't close my eyes.
Wake up, Watson, wake up.
Yes, Mary dear. It's you. Oh, we're still in this infernal trap.
I'm afraid so, old chap.
What time is it?
Just after 7 in the morning.
How long did you estimate our oxygen supply would last?
Probably about another hour.
Well, it's just possible that some worker will come to the laboratory early and let us out.
I shouldn't count too much on that if I were you.
I suppose not. I say, Holmes, I'm famished.
Yes, I thought you would be, my dear chap, so I saved you this half of a bar of chocolate. I ate my own share just before you awakened.
Oh, thanks, my dear fellow. Did you sleep too, Holmes?
No, I didn't, Watson. I employed my time in conducting a minute examination of this chamber. I was trying to find some possible way of getting out.
And you failed, eh?
I'm afraid so.
Holmes, this looks like the end, doesn't it? Well, if it is my time to die, I'm glad that we're together again. Although I blame myself entirely for letting you into the trap.
Come now, my dear fellow. Don't take it as badly as that.
But you admitted you're defeated and that there's no possible way out of this destiny.
I meant that there's no way out from the inside. So my plan worked.
Good gracious me, what on earth?
The star, there you are.
Mary! Mary, you dear little thing, you must have been frightened to death.
Hello, Don. Poor dear, you must have spent a miserable night.
Well. Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson have been getting themselves in trouble again, eh?
Now, this is no time for your heavy-handed badinage. There's the body of a murdered woman inside that chamber. She was killed by Professor Moriarty.
Professor Moriarty?
It's too bad you didn't get my message sooner.
Your message?
Oh, bless my soul, Holmes. I wish you'd tell me how you got your message to Scotland Yard.
Well, ever since these recent attacks on my life, I've had my delightful band of ragamuffins, the Baker Street Irregulars, watching my house in fixed watches, 2 at a time. I gave the boys instructions to follow me whenever I went out. And if ever I did not reappear within 3 hours, they were to report to our friend Lestrade at Scotland Yard.
Holmes, you're amazing. You think of everything.
Just a minute, gentlemen, just a minute. I didn't get no message from any of your Baker Street irregulars.
Oh, you didn't?
No, sir. Though I did find a couple of the boys tied up when we came in here just now.
If you didn't get a message from them, how did you come here so opportunely?
That's an easy one. Because Mrs. Watson here came and fetched me.
You did, Mary? But how on earth?
Go on, Mom. Tell him.
Well, it's really very simple. When John came back from seeing you yesterday, Mr. Holmes, he was over elaborately casual in his references to the Paradol chamber. So, of course, I knew at once the two of you were going to investigate the matter. I also caught him oiling his revolver after dinner. I didn't know that you slipped out last night, John. But as soon as I woke up this morning, I realized what had happened. So I went straight to Scotland Yard for Inspector Lestrade and brought him here with me.
Why, Mary, you clever little thing. Isn't she a clever darling, Holmes?
Mrs. Watson, this has been a salutary experience. Will you allow me to congratulate you on your deductive ability?
Well, that's very nice of you, Mr. Holmes, but I really don't deserve any compliments, if you don't mind my saying so. It was elementary, my dear Mr. Holmes. Elementary.
This is Bob Campbell saying good night for the Petrie family. This program comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. Petrie Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petrie family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another of his fascinating stories about his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. You know, we're really happy to be back with you once again, and we're looking forward to getting together at this time every week from here on out. And I hope you won't mind if every once in a while I sort of get a word in edgewise about Petrie wines. You know, and I really mean this, Petrie wines are wonderful wines. For instance, right now, I wish I could give you a glass of Petrie California port. You could hold that Petrie port up to the light and look at its clear, deep red color. You could smell that luscious grape aroma. And best of all, you could taste that Petrie port. What a flavor. That Petrie port just sort of rolls around on your tongue, and oh boy, is that ever good. Try Petrie port after dinner some evening, or try it when some friends drop in. You can serve it proudly because, after all, the name Petrie is the proudest name in the history of American wines. And now let's look in on our good friend Dr. Watson and see if he's expecting us.
Come in, Mr. Bartell. You're just the man I've been expecting.
How are you, Dr. Watson? It's good to see you again.
Thank you, my boy. It's very nice to see you again, too. I've missed our Monday night visits during the last 3 months. Sit yourself down. Would you care to join me in a glass of port?
Thanks, Doctor. That'd be nice. You know, it seems to me after our summer vacation, a toast to the great Sherlock Holmes would be in order.
That's an excellent idea. Here you are, young fellow, my lad.
Thanks. You propose the toast, Doctor.
To Sherlock Holmes, master detective and loyal friend, whose adventures have brought considerable, we say, fame to a certain retired doctor now living in Northern California.
I'll drink to that.
Well, now, suppose I might as well get on with tonight's story.
Which particular adventure have you selected, Doctor?
One that I call The Limping Ghost.
Sounds exciting. And, as usual, you find me saying, how did it begin?
In Baker Street on a windy December evening at the turn of the century. A young, white-faced boy sat in front of our blazing fire. And as he told us his strange story, the flickering firelight danced weird patterns on the walls. The young man was Alexander McMorris, the 7th Earl of Lochnair.
The Earl of Lochnair? Say, didn't I read in the papers the other day that the 8th Earl of Lochnair had been killed in an airplane accident?
Quite right, my boy. Even in this day and age, the tragic history of violent death seems to dog the footsteps of the Lochnair family. But to return to my story. On that December night in 1900, we heard the whole history of the limping ghost of Lochnair. The first Earl had lost a foot at the Battle of Flodden Field in 1513. In spite of this terrible handicap, he fought on valiantly until he died on the battlefield from loss of blood. From then on, right until the time this story begins, the limping ghost, clad in a suit of armor, always appeared at Lochnair Castle before and after the death of the current Earl. Yes, Mr. Bartell, it was a strange story that Sherlock Holmes and I listened to that night. A story of death and horror over the centuries, punctuated by the limping clank of ghostly armor.
Milady, I have terrible news for you. Your husband, the Earl, was killed in the explosion that destroyed Lord Darnley.
Milady, the Guy Fawkes plan to blow up the Houses of Parliament has failed. Your husband is in the Tower of London. They say he's to be hanged, drawn, and quartered.
Madam, I regret to inform you that your husband, on my instructions, has been arrested for murder. I have no doubt that he will be hanged.
And that's the story of the Lochnairs, Mr. Holmes.
You were instrumental in sending my great uncle to the gallows, a fate which he richly deserved, I'm told. So it seemed only natural to come here to Baker Street and consult you now.
I shall be most happy to do anything I can to help you, sir.
I don't remember anything about your sending the Earl of Lochnair to the scaffold, Holmes.
Well, he did, Dr. Watson.
Oh, really?
And the servants have always sworn the ghost really did walk at midnight on the day that he was hanged.
Indeed. Now, sir, I suggest that you tell us what problem brought you here.
The ghost is walking again, Mr. Holmes. You know what that means.
According to the legend, that the present Earl will die.
Exactly. And as I'm the present Earl, you can see why I'm rather worried.
Am I to understand that you've actually seen this ghost yourself?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. The night before last, Betty, well, that is, Miss Nolan and I were sitting in the dining hall in front of the fire when we heard a strange sound up in the musicians' gallery. We looked up and in the moonlight saw a ghostly figure in armor limping towards the staircase.
Oh, gracious me. My dear sir, you're certain that you really saw it? Moonlight can play strange tricks, you know.
There wasn't any doubt about it, Doctor. We both saw and heard it.
What did you do?
I started to go towards the stairs, but as I did so, Betty screamed and then tumbled to the floor in a heap.
Fainted, I suppose.
Yes. While I was reviving her, the ghost disappeared.
Who's staying with you at Lochnair Castle at the moment?
Well, there's Betty Nolan. She's the sister of James Nolan. He looks after my estate. Betty and I are engaged to be married.
Oh, congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Anyone else staying with you?
Yes, a distant cousin of mine, Jeremy K. McMorris, an American. He turned up in England a couple of months ago with his son, Walter. They're both with me at the present.
A distant cousin?
That's right, Mr. Holmes. Actually, they're descendants of a more than usually black sheep branch of the family. I don't know how long the old man's going to be with us, though. If you ask me, he's a dying man.
How do you say that, sir?
As far as I can gather, he's been wasting away for years. It's only a question of time before his strength fails him entirely. I was hoping perhaps you could take a look at him, Dr. Watson. That is, if I could persuade you and Mr. Holmes to come and stay at the castle for a few days.
Well, what about it, Holmes?
It's an intriguing problem, Watson. The current Earl of Lochnair would seem to be in danger. A cousin of his is dying of an obscure disease, and the ghost of Lochnair Castle is walking again. Yes, it's an irresistible invitation. I see no reason why we can't leave on the Scotch Express tonight. Been quite a heavy fall of snow here in your absence, young man.
Quite so, and judging from the color of the sky, there's more to come.
Very angry looking.
Oh, now, as we round this bend, you'll be able to see the castle. Ah, yes. There you are, gentlemen.
Magnificent.
Yes, it's a fine place, all right, Doctor, though it cost me a great deal in upkeep. As a matter of fact, I only have one wing open. It's always been something of a problem to get servants to come and live here. You see, the local villagers have a great respect for the Lochnair ghost, you know.
What servants do you have at the castle at present?
A cook housekeeper, Mrs. McClintock, fine old lady who's been with me for 6 years now. And then there's old Tammas. He served my family for as long as I can remember. As a matter of fact, there he is now. Hello, Tammas.
I'm glad to see you back, my lord, and that's a fact.
Oh, thank you, Tammas. Oh, these gentlemen are Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson.
Good day to you, gentlemen.
How do you do?
Good day, Thomas. Good day.
Before I take the trap round to the stables, I may as well break the news to you.
Yes, what's happened, Tammas?
It's your cousin, my lord. Poor old Mr. McMorris. He's dead. What? Died early this morning. God rest his soul.
Dead?
I'm very sorry that I arrived too late to be of any help.
Well, thank you for telling me, Tammas. Well, you may take the trap round now.
Aye, sir. I'll bring the baggage up later.
So he's dead. Well, I can't say it's unexpected, but it is a shock nevertheless.
I'm sure that it must be, particularly as you yourself told us you saw the ghost of Lochnair the night before last.
In which case...
In which case, Watson, I think we may reasonably expect another visitation. Perhaps before the night is over. Shall we go in?
This is Miss Nolan, my fiancée, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and Dr. Watson.
I'm very glad to meet you.
How are you, Miss Nolan?
And this is her brother, James Nolan, the manager of my estate.
How do you do, sir?
How are you, Mr. Nolan?
Much better for seeing you both up here. I'm sure it won't take you long to lay this ghost business by the heels.
Well, I trust you don't overestimate our abilities, Mr. Nolan.
Alec, you've heard about your cousin, of course.
Oh, yes, my dear. Tammas told us as we drove up. Where's Walter?
He went into the village with the doctor and the body of his father. He should be back soon.
How's he taking it?
Very quietly.
Too quietly, if you ask me. Those Americans are pretty demonstrative people, you know, and Walters has been no exception. But he behaved very strangely this morning. When the doctor told him his father was dead, he just said, now things will start to happen, and then shut up like an oyster. I can't make head or tail of the fellow.
Yes, quite so, Carter. Mr. Holmes, I expect you and Dr. Watson would like to go to your room.
Yes, I must be.
I think first I'd like to take a look at the musicians' gallery, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, of course. Would you excuse us, darling?
All right, Alex.
It's in the dining hall here.
They must have been very hospitable people in those days. 50 or 60 people could eat at that table.
Yes, Doctor. Needless to remark, we hardly ever use the room nowadays. There's the musicians' gallery, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, yes, I see. How do we get up there?
I'll show you. See, there's a stone staircase behind this tapestry here. Follow me. Watch your step. It's quite narrow, rather dark.
Watch your head, Watson, old chap.
Oh, don't worry about me, Holmes. I'm perfect. Oh, I say. Must have built these stairs for pygmies.
Oh, yes. Here we are, gentlemen. This is the musicians' gallery.
By Jove. It must have made a pretty picture in the days gone by. A little string orchestra fiddling away up here, and down below the Scottish nobility bobbing and floating round in the intricacies of a Highland schottische or a stately gavotte or something.
Where does that door lead to?
To the bedroom wing.
And that's where the ghost appeared from the other night, I suppose.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Uh-huh. The door's ajar. You generally keep this door unlocked, sir?
Why, no. But the key mysteriously disappeared about a week ago. James is having a new one made. I must remind him about that.
Alex!
Alex, all right? Oh, we're up here, Walter. We're coming down. That's Walter McMorris. My dead cousin's son.
Poor fellow, this must be a dreadful day for him.
Yes, I'm afraid this is going to be a rather painful interview. Oh, hello, Walter. This is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
How do you do, sir?
How do you do?
Sherlock Holmes, sir. I've heard about you and your friend, Dr. Watson.
Walter, old man, I'm dreadfully sorry about your father.
Are you now? Isn't that nice of you? Well, you'll be sorry enough when you hear that I'm going to take you to court and prove that I'm the real Earl of Lochmere.
Why, Walter, you're out of your mind.
Am I? No. Father was out of his because he kept quiet all these years. But I'm going to have my rights. I've looked up the records. I've had genealogists working for months. And I've got all the facts that prove you're an imposter.
What are you talking about?
You know well enough. When Sherlock Holmes here sent your great-uncle to the gallows 20 years ago, the title and estate should have come to my father. When I leave here tomorrow, I'm going straight to the finest lawyer in London.
Man, if you believe this, why have you said nothing about it till now?
Because I'm smart. I've found out a thing or two since I've been staying here. And one of the things I found out is that your precious fiancée and her brother wouldn't look twice at you if it weren't for your money and the title.
Shut up.
You'll find out. She's a smart little filly, and she knows what kind of a track she's running on.
You dirty...
My compliments, sir. A very professional uppercut.
Yes, and a very well-deserved one.
Hi.
Offensive scoundrel.
Sorry about this. Please don't say anything in front of Betty. It'd only upset her.
I quite understand. Come along, Watson. Let's go and find our rooms.
Holmes, it's nearly dinner time. Why are we wandering about here in the dark instead of having a glass of sherry with the others in the library?
I'm a conscientious practitioner, Watson. I like to earn my fees. It occurred to me that a further examination of this dining hall might prove profitable.
Well, personally, Holmes, I think you're wasting your time on this case.
What makes you think that, old chap?
It's perfectly obvious that young American fellow was impersonating the ghost a few nights ago. He knew his father was going to die, and he wanted to build up the legend so as to make his own claim seem more believable.
Well, that's very sound reasoning, Watson. Though to be logical in his deception, he should repeat the performance now that his father is dead.
Well, ghosts only walk at midnight, so why don't we go and have a glass of sherry? Huh? What is it, Holmes?
Someone's coming in from the library. Watch it, Cap.
Yes? Who is it?
It's me, Mrs. McClintock, the whiskey.
Oh, gracious me, you gave me quite a start.
I heard voices and I knew the candles were not alight in here, so I came in to see who it was. You're watching for the ghost, I suppose. Well, you'll no be disappointed, gentlemen, though you may see more than you bargained for. Those that meddle with ghostly things they dinna comprehend are playing with something much more dangerous than fire. Fire burns. But the shades on dead people...
Holmes! Look up there in the gallery. The door's opening. It's the ghost.
Aye, here he comes, the poor body. See the armor on him, and the way he's dragging one leg behind him.
Yes, it's really quite an effective impersonation. And the twilight provides most appropriate lighting for his play acting, too.
You mean it's the young American?
Of course, obviously.
Look behind him. There's another figure.
Yes. Dressed in the same kind of armor and carrying a sword. The game's afoot, Watson.
The ghost has seen him. He's turning. The second figure's raising his sword.
Look out!
Great heavens. He's knocked him through the railings. That must be a 20-foot fall.
Come on, old fellow. Help me open his visor.
Just a minute.
Yes. It's Walter McMorris, the American. Though from the angle of his head, I would suggest that it might be the late Walter McMorris, eh, Watson?
He's dead, all right, Holmes. Neck broken.
Meanwhile, the second figure has been able to slip back through that door and escape us. Come on, he was dressed in armor. He can't go very fast. Perhaps we can overtake him.
Dr. Watson's story will continue in just a few seconds, which is all the time I need to tell you about Petri California Muscatel. Ever try Petri Muscatel? It's a wine that looks like sheer gold, and it's made from big, plump, juicy Muscat grapes. Boy, pop one of those Muscat grapes into your mouth, and you know you've got something delicious. You know that. And you get the same flavor in Petri Muscatel. It's the perfect wine to serve a lady. Women love it. And that best time to serve it is after dinner or on a Sunday afternoon, you know, times like that. But just make sure it's Petri Muscatel, because that's the way to make sure it's going to be good. Remember, Petri. And now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure and the story of the limping ghost of Loch Ness.
Confound it, Holmes. There's no trace of the ghost in the musician's gallery.
We gave him too much of a start, I'm afraid.
Of course you didn't find him. You'll never find him because he's not mortal.
Mrs. McClintock, is the original suit of armor the one worn by the first Earl of Loch Ness still in the castle?
Aye, sir. It's in the library through that door there. I'll take you to it.
Don't bother, thank you. We'll find it. Come on, Watson. Bring that candle with you.
Right, you're home.
If you know what's good for you, you'll stop dabbling in matters you dinna really ken.
Holmes, what do you make of the second ghost?
Another imposter, obviously.
But who could it have been?
That's what we have to find out, old chap. Undoubtedly someone knew that the American Walter McMorris was impersonating the ghost and used this macabre method to kill him.
But why kill him?
Possibly his claims to the title and estate were valid. Or perhaps some fanatic was so devoted to the Loch Ness legend that he assumed the role of ghost and killed him for his sacrilege. Hold the candle a little higher, will you, old chap?
Yeah. Hello. Here's a suit of armor, Holmes. Lying in a heap on the floor.
Oh, on the floor, eh? Whereas it obviously belongs on that stand over there.
It's perfectly clear what's happened. The second figure used this armor and slipped it back in here while we were examining the dead man.
Possibly, Watson, possibly. At least this armor gives us a definite clue. But it limits the field of possible suspects.
How do you mean, Holmes?
Well, it's an interesting fact that the human race has grown definitely larger in the past 400 years. Very few modern men can wear authentic ancient armor like this. For example, take the first item on the top of the heap lying on the floor here. These gauntlets of chain mail. Try them on.
Well, much too small for
exactly.
me.
Neither you nor I could have worn this suit.
No, nor could young Nolan, the estate agent.
Whereas his sister could have done.
Yes, so could Thomas the butler. He's a small fellow.
And if it comes to that, Watson, our distinguished client, the young Earl of Loch Ness, is himself a small man.
Right, so he is. And he might easily have had a motive. Young McMorris had disputed his right to the title earlier in the day.
But we mustn't jump to conclusions. Nevertheless, you see what valuable evidence this armor has become.
Hello. It sounds as if the rest of the party are on the scene.
Yes, I suggest that we join them without making any reference to this suit of armor. Remember, old chap, one of them in there is a murderer. And we may have to set a trap to catch him.
Are you sure he's dead, Dr. Watson?
There's no doubt about it. His neck was broken instantly by the fall.
It's dreadful. Father and son both dying on the same day.
And you say the real ghost came up behind him, Mr. Holmes, and struck him so they crashed through the railing up there?
I said another figure dressed in armor killed him, Mr. Nolan.
'Twas a real ghost. I saw him with my own 2 eyes. He killed that man for trying to bring shame on the name of Lochnair.
Shouldn't we get into touch with the police?
How can I get a message to them tonight? Have you looked outside? We're almost completely snowed in.
Snowed in. Oh, Alec, I'm frightened.
Hush, darling. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore.
No, at least we have the assurance that the ghost will not limp again.
Why?
Well, the murderer has no further motive for impersonating the ghost. To walk now would be to support the dead American's claims. No. We shall spend a quiet night, and tomorrow I shall communicate with the proper authorities as to my quite definite notions regarding the murderer's identity.
But if the ghost should walk again, Mr. Holmes?
Well, then, sir, I shall know that at last I've encountered a truly supernatural crime and shall retire from the practice of detection.
It's nearly 2 o'clock. You still over there by the window, puffing away that pipe of yours? You know, I can't help feeling that young McMorris knows a great deal more than he told us. A great deal more. There's a shifty look about him I don't like. Never did trust a fellow who could look you squarely in the eyes. Don't you feel the same way, Holmes? Holmes? Holmes, where are you? Holmes!
Shh. What, Watson?
Where have you been? I thought you were over there by the window. Been talking to myself.
Never mind that, old chap. Get your slippers on and your dressing gown. We're on the last lap of this strange, eventful tragedy.
Thank the Lord for that. Perhaps I can get some sleep. Holmes, where have you been?
I went to the musician's gallery and baited the trap. Now it's ready to spring. Don't dawdle, Watson. Come on, come on.
I'm not dawdling. What do you mean you baited a trap?
You'll see for yourself in a few moments. As a matter of fact, I really baited it when I said downstairs that if the real ghost should walk again, I would retire from the practice of detection.
I didn't understand your saying that myself.
Well, I was tempting the murderer to show his hand once more. Come on, please.
Where are we going?
To wait behind the curtain at the foot of the stairs leading to the musician's gallery. And I hope we don't have to wait very long.
Holmes, I'm getting a crick in my neck trying to peer through this wretched curtain. How much longer do we have to wait?
Our murderer arrives.
You certain he'll come?
Not certain, but hopeful. Extremely hopeful.
You know who it is, don't you?
Yes. But my proof is too thin for a court of law. I must catch him in the act.
Here he comes.
Splendid.
Let's go up and grab him.
No. They walk into my trap.
He's coming towards the head of the stairs. Oh! Great Scott!
Exactly. A simple piece of wire stretched across the gallery is remarkably effective, even with ghosts. Come on, Watson. Help me off with this visor.
There we are. Good Lord, it's James Nolan.
Exactly.
What happened?
You walked into a simple trap, my friend. I'm afraid the next trap will be more lethal, for it will undoubtedly prove to be the one beneath the gallows.
Now that we're headed back for London, Holmes, perhaps you'll settle 1 or 2 points in the case that are bothering me quite a bit.
With pleasure, my dear chap. What are they?
I still don't see what Nolan's motive was in murdering the American.
Oh, that should be obvious. He wanted to ensure that his sister's fiancé would enjoy undisputed title to the name and estates.
Well, how did you know it was Nolan?
When I examined the authentic suit of armor, you see, it was obvious it had never been worn.
But I still don't quite understand.
Oh, come now, old chap.
What?
The suit of armor was in a heap on the floor.
Yeah?
And if it had been hastily discarded, and yet, the gauntlets were on top of the pile, you remember?
That's right, they were.
If the suit had really been worn, the gauntlets would have been the first things to have been taken off, and so would have been underneath the pile. Obviously, therefore, the armor had been disarranged in order to make people believe the real ghost had walked. After the American's death, the suspects were 4. Miss Nolan, her brother, Thomas, the butler, and The Earl himself. Well, I ruled out Mrs. McClintock because, you remember, she was standing behind us at the time of the murder.
Well, I'm beginning to understand. All the suspects except Nolan were small enough to have worn the armor.
That's right. Therefore, only he could have pretended to use it.
Pretended? But he did use it.
Oh, no, my dear fellow. Undoubtedly, he procured a similar one of modern manufacture.
An amazing case, Holmes.
An interesting one, at any rate. And once again, old fellow, I'm forcibly reminded of an old Scottish litany.
Scottish litany? Which one's that?
Oh, you remember it. From ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night. Good Lord, deliver us.
Well, Doctor, that was really a swell story. You know, for a while there, I was beginning to believe in ghosts.
Well, I'm ashamed to admit it, but at the time, so was I.
You know, this sounds silly, but I bet it would be fun to be one of those legendary English ghosts. You know, go around sticking your nose into everybody's business and playing practical jokes like mad and nobody able to figure out who did it. That would really be fun in a way.
Well, you can go around scaring people all you want to, but not for me. I think a ghost leads a terrible life myself. For instance, a ghost can't have the pleasure of eating a nice, juicy steak.
Yeah, or drinking a glass of really good wine.
Ah, now you're talking, young fellow, my lad.
Petri wine.
Yeah, still talking, young fellow.
You see, when I say good wine, I always mean Petri wine because you can depend on